Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners work session for September 3rd, 2013. For those of you in attendance, we've got quite a few people here today. If you will, please put your mobile devices on silent or vibrate so they don't go off during the meeting. We appreciate all of you that are here today. The first order of action for us commissioners is approve the work session agenda. If you will notice, there are a number of changes on the next page of your hard copy. So at this time, I would accept a motion to approve the work session agenda with the changes. To have a motion and a second, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next, we have discussion items. No action to be taken tonight. We always begin with the QSCB projects. And Mr. Whitkey is here. And I don't see Mr. Crabtree, so welcome, Mr. Whitkey.
The milestone report is what you see in front of you, and we've talked about a number of times. The thing that I would like to point out is, although it's only 3 weeks old, there have been some improvements to the story, so I'll simply share those with you as we move forward. With Cabarrus Central High School, we've now completed all of the punch list work. We did that with a separate contractor based on advice from our attorney. And we've now completed all that work, so we're at this point negotiating with the surety in terms of surety for the original contractor on the project to work out a final payment. We've gotten that final payment request. We have our expenditures, which are less than that amount of money, and so we're just working that out with the contractor and his surety. So hopefully within the next month we'll close that out completely. Northwest Gym Addition, the gymnasium itself, in effect the remodeling of the original gymnasium building has now been completed to the point we have a temporary occupancy permit, what they call certificate of occupancy, excuse me. And so we're able to use the building as for the purposes it was intended. And so the school is occupying that, and the contractor is still working on the addition and the exterior work, sidewalks, paving, that sort of thing, around the building. Their anticipated completion date here was the end of August. With the amount of weather conditions they had to deal with, they're still looking at completing in probably the next 2 to 3 weeks. So they've not made the original target date, but they're clearly working literally, not around the clock, but certainly 7 days a week to get the job done. The Mount Pleasant boilers, the boiler parts are arriving this week. So they'll begin, we've already had the old boilers removed. So the minute the parts have arrived, we'll have the contractor begin installing them, and so everything should be in place prior to the heating season. Depending on what the woolly bear shows. I don't know about everybody else, but I've seen a lot of woolly bears, so we'll see if the old climate detector is correct. The weight room and vocational building at Concord High School, that too has been delayed slightly because of all the weather. The tentative completion date now is the early part of November, but the contractor, fingers crossed, will have dry weather, or at least drier weather than what we've had, and complete ahead of that date. But that's the far date, is the 6th of November. They are, if you go out there, you'll see them finishing up the masonry walls. The next thing would be setting steel for the roof and enclosing the building. And that's really the outlook for the next 30 days. The upgrade of electrical panels at a variety of schools, that is now complete in terms of all the work. The final payment requests have been submitted and they have been approved, so they're in the process of being paid, and we'll close that project out next month. The partial roof replacement at Jan Freeze, the project was successfully bid. The contractor, we had that they would mobilize in late August. Due to weather conditions and work on other projects that was delayed, he will not be able to start until September. But again, we fully believe that it's a relatively small amount of roofing that has to be done, and they should be able to complete that before severe weather sets in. The remaining projects are postponed and no longer being pursued. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Whitkey, I have one question for you. We got an email from Bobby McGee for Central Cabarrus High School, and he had a a list of things that they would like to see done, but I had gone out to meet with him this morning, and he took me into his weight room, and the ceiling in there is very poor shape. It has got mold growing on probably 30 panels, and some of them are, I mean, for a square panel, they're 100% mold grown. What can we do to remedy that situation for them?
We're in the process of bidding the roof replacement. That's been the problem. It's just the age of it is such that we would patch something, and a few days later, a few weeks later, another break in the roofing membrane would occur right afterwards. So we've decided the best thing to do is replace the whole roof, and we're in the process of getting the bid out and getting the specifications completed and out to bid, hopefully this week. So.
Are we going to replace the roof for the entire school or just for the portion above the weight room? The principal had mentioned to me that when they installed the glass for the new windows, they had cut away at some of the roof, and they were having some other problems with leakage, so I wasn't sure how much of the roof we're going to redo.
At this point, we're focusing on the weight room because of the conditions you've mentioned, and the long-range plan is ultimately to do something with the building, that's for sure. But our immediate attention is on the focus on the weight room area. You're welcome.
So that roof replacement for the weight room, that will not be a QSCB project?
No,
correct?
sir.
Okay.
No.
And so when should you be putting that out to bid?
I would hope we'll get the documents done and out on the streets either late this week or early next week. Give the contractors about 10 days to bid the work. So
Okay.
mid-month, we should have our
Okay.
numbers.
So it should be a fairly quick process?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
How many schools we have with roof problems?
It's quite a few, to be honest with you. When you consider that I would say approximately 50% of our schools are 25 years or older, a lot of the roofs are in need of major repair or replacement.
Are some of the roofs 25 years old too?
Yes, sir.
You change roofs on a house. I don't know why we wouldn't be working on the roofs on these school buildings instead of letting them deteriorate to the point that, the longer it leaks, the more trouble you got, the more problems you got. Looks to me like that's the first thing you'd fix is the roof. I don't understand why this county has let the school system go to the point that maintenance has been neglected, and it's going to cost us a small fortune to fix all this stuff in the long run, and we just keep letting it go. It don't make sense to me.
We've done a lot of patching over the years, mainly because of the costs of new roofs. Not generally, as I just described. Over time, it will catch up with you. And the most difficult thing that we're facing now is that with the new energy code in place, probably the cost of roofing has gone up twice what it was a few years ago. And so that was another shock when we bid Jan Freeze, was the amount of cost, because we had done work earlier as part of the QSCB, and that was much less cost because we weren't having to meet the new energy code. So it's a substantial change, and we do have a number of those roofs listed in the budget. We keep asking for them, and but granted, it's a formidable cost now. When you look at replacing like a one-story high school or a one-story middle school, it's a lot of roof area and a lot of cost. So. And you're right. I mean, because of the potential damage to the interior of the school, and the problems that it creates. Luckily, we've not had a lot of areas that have been put out of use by leaks. We've had our fair share of problems this year with all the water that we've received. And I would say, hopefully, this is a unique condition. But in terms of the age of the roofs and the amount of work that it takes to keep them up, it's substantial. And I think with today's energy costs going where they're going, the long-range, ROI, if you will, on a new roof makes a lot more sense than trying to patch the old ones.
Okay, any other questions on the QSCBs? Okay, I think you have the next item up.
Yes, ma'am.
Also on the Central Cabarrus High School Planetarium report.
I know we got the report to you rather late, and I apologize for that, Commissioners. This was a report that I talked about in past presentations. It's presented by Mr. Richard McColeman, and he's run and operated, I should say, and been director of planetariums most of his professional life. And he's actually the second person that we consulted with. So this was not the, if you recall, Ash Industries was, or excuse me, Ash Enterprises was one of the firms that we talked with initially. And when the commissioners decided that we should consider bidding this work out, I felt a little uneasy about Ash because they are actually a provider of services and equipment. So we then looked around for someone who was completely independent, and this person, Mr. Mick Coleman, is, as I say, a director of planetariums and has no interest in bidding any of the work, so therefore his opinion is unbiased in that regard. And so we've asked him to look at the equipment. He did a similar review and research on the equipment that the Ash folks did. His findings are a little different. He looked at two options, really, in terms of the main projector equipment. One was reusing the original equipment, which was damaged, and I believe that he said in his report that that was one of the reasons that it sort of got stopped in use, was that the damage to the equipment was severe enough that it could not be used on a regular basis. It can be repaired, but it is, I'm going to say, 50-year-old technology. It is repairable, but it has its limitations. And as you read the report, his recommendation is really to look at the option number 2, which is to go away from what we have currently, which is I'll liken it to a more of a mechanical process, and go to a digital source or digital projector system, which is certainly the technology of today and hopefully the near future. Because it has much more capability in terms of what it can deliver. And I think that if the commissioners would like to go forward, we can certainly bid it both ways. That's not, a difficulty. But I think that the idea of selecting one without really, his recommendations is really going and looking at each. There's a system very similar to the existing planetarium system up in Salisbury. And so we could literally go there and see for ourselves what it looks like. And then I believe he recommended a facility in Georgia that has one of the newer digital systems that he would like to propose as a fair comparison. It's not the highest end of the digital. One of the things with digital equipment is right now it's very, very expensive. He did recommend one manufacturer whose price would be comparable to what we had budgeted for the mechanical system, and feels that it's a good workhorse system and one that is being employed in Valdosta, Georgia. So he suggested we might want to, not the whole board, but if people would like to see it, that it's available to be seen in operation before we accept a bid for any of the work. So the other part that you'll see, and we talked about this briefly too, and it's similar to the Ash Enterprises recommendation, is that for the equipment components like the stereo system, the lighting, the dome painting, and other elements that are all tied to the, if you will, the quality of the projection of the planetarium, he recommends that all be bid under one base bid. Other improvements such as painting walls and carpeting, things, I'll say aesthetic qualities, that can certainly be handled by our department using local contractors. But the equipment, if you will, necessary for the planetarium to function, he strongly recommends taking a single base bid on that so that you get the right quality of contractor to do the work. A good example is just painting of the dome. It's not somebody just standing up there with a spray gun painting a dome. It's a very unique finish process, and he goes into quite a length to explain it. And I think in so doing, gives reason to believe that we have to have a single party, a single entity responsible for all of that equipment. So with that, I'm certainly available to answer whatever questions I can. The technical parts, I would simply say, I think Mr. Coleman has done a good job of explaining it in detail, but I will try and answer any of your questions.
You don't have a total cost on this project, do you?
You
talked about the roof need to be replaced on that planetarium, correct?
He did.
The walls need to be painted. new carpet.
Yes, sir.
I forget what all else in it is, $170-something thousand just for his part, plus all the other things that had to be done. You don't have a complete cost for that though, do you?
No, because I didn't add the roof in originally. We were looking sort of at the interior of the space. And again, we are researching that to find out the age of the roof, but I suspect it's the age of the rest of the building. And
Well, there's no need in painting the inside if the roof's leaking, is it?
that was the comment he made, and that's for sure, because just the painting alone of the dome is somewhere in the range of $15,000, and it would be a waste to paint it and have water come through the roof. So I would agree, we probably need to re-roof that portion of the building as well. And my quick estimates this morning, as I was looking at that, was somewhere around $30,000 to do that portion of it. Yes, sir. So there's additional costs. Originally, our estimate was 165,000 and change, but that did not include the roof.
So the figure of 155,825, that is, that's strictly for just the operating system. I do see painting the dome. So it'd be roughly additional $30,000 for the roof.
For the roof, and then if we wanted new carpeting, his point was,
Right.
and that we'd be penetrating when we remove the existing
Right.
chairs, they'll leave holes, and more than likely, the new chairs would not fit that configuration, so you'd have something that looked a little unsightly and more apt to tear over time, so.
So how much are we looking at for new chairs, carpet, paint?
The chairs are actually part of the
Okay.
cost, but as I recall, I might be wrong. No, planetarium seating, yep.
I don't see them.
Yes, sir, yes. But the carpeting was not, and I'd say you're probably looking at something in the range of $15,000 to recarpet that area.
Okay.
Depending on what you pick, but between 10 and 15,000 for that area. And then there was additional lighting. Painting that's something we can do with staff, so that's not a major issue. But the lighting, the general lighting, not the cove lighting at all, probably needs to be really relooked at, because it's T12 fluorescent lighting, which needs to be replaced. And ideally, we'd like to do something more efficient there, so there'd be a cost to that. So I would say you'd probably be looking at 30 or so for the roof, and probably, I'm going to think, somewhere around 25,000 for remaining interior finishes.
Okay. Well, I certainly appreciate the report, and it's a very detailed report, reading over, and answers a lot of questions, about the operating system and about the planetarium itself. Of course, I would like to see some details about what additional expenses, as far as,
Yes, sir.
The carpeting, the paint, things of that nature, so that way we have a total cost.
Right. And I can bring that to you next year,
Right.
next week.
You're in the neighborhood of $250,000, aren't you? Somewhere,
Yes, 200,
250,
225.
275.
Hopefully, we
too
want
high?
to, yeah, I hope, if I'm doing my calculations
Well, we're
right.
talking about government work now.
That's right. But I'm hoping we wouldn't exceed about 230,000.
So how much do we have, what have our expenditures been thus far? Has there been a cost involved with these quotes? I know you've spent time on it for sure.
Mhm.
Has there been any other cost?
No, the very nice thing about Mr. McColeman is that he's offered his services free of charge. He's a very dedicated scientist, and really feels it's important that if you're going to do a planetarium, that it be done well, and that it's be a service to the community. So he's offered his services without charge. I simply said I would think that the commissioners in our department would be happy to cover his travel costs to and from the location, because he's from the Chapel Hill area. So, and even that, the first time down, he refused reimbursement, so.
Well, I've spoken in favor of this project in the past, and I think it would be an asset to the students in both school systems in Cabarrus County. The one thing that has occurred to me that's a missing piece of this project, as I was explaining to a parent this past week about the relationship between the commissioners and the schools, and that funding of schools is certainly a big chunk of our budget and that we're responsible for, but there were a great many other things that we're responsible for as well. And for that reason, I felt that it was incumbent upon us to depend on our school board members who are elected the same way we are, and they specialize strictly in schools. They don't deal with all the other issues that we do. And it occurred to me that we had made this discussion, and I've not heard any feedback from the school board or from the administration at all. I see Mr. Kiger sitting over there, and I'm not going to put him on the spot to comment at this meeting, but in order for me to support going forward with this project, certainly as the expense continues to grow, I would need to hear from the folks on the school board if this is what they want or not. You know, I don't think it's appropriate for us to make a decision outside the realm of their understanding of the needs of the schools, and we just got through talking about roofs and more roofs, and the list is very long and very expensive. So that, you know, I'm not sure that's directed to you, but there are others in the audience hearing it as well. And so that's the missing piece that I would, before I could support going forward with this project, you know, I would need to hear from the school board and say, this, we agree with you, this is something we think we ought to do. So I hope we'll get some feedback from them. I certainly intend to try to solicit some, but thank you for the good work on this.
Thank you,
It's
sir.
very thorough, and I appreciate it.
Now, he also mentioned in this report about possibly charging a fee to some of the people who would use this planetarium. Wasn't that in there? Who
Yes.
was he talking about? Outside county residents or?
Well, I think, you know, schools would more than likely use the facility without cost, but
Yeah.
in terms of outside organizations, folks that, I think, and I haven't been to Salisbury, so I can't say what the cost is, but I believe there is a charge to go and see the show at the planetarium. I think it's minor in amount, but I believe you do pay to attend. And that's what he was talking about was, you know, the average public, if let's say the school wanted to put on a show every Friday evening or every Saturday evening, you've got the offsetting, you've got cost of staff and cost of running the facility, and he was suggesting that we may want to have a token fee for attending to help offset that cost. And that's certainly not a decision that needs to be made now, but he was just offering that as an idea.
Well, it would help pay for the system.
Mhm. Yes, it would. And the maintenance, that's the other thing he does point out is, long-term, just like anything electronic, it will have to be maintained over the years. So.
Yeah.
Has there been any discussion from the school board, any sort of votes or anything that they've taken regarding the planetarium?
No, not an official
Okay.
vote.
I
No, absolutely.
don't want to jump in on the discussion, but I wanted to at least answer a question or two. We have talked about it informally amongst ourselves a little bit and with administration, and Commissioner Morris makes a good point of kind of what we've talked about is it would really be a neat project, especially at a STEM school. You know, we have a high school that is a STEM school that is going to specialize in science, technology, engineering, and math. At one time, it was one of 2 high schools that had a planetarium. So it's really neat, but currently, all we have is fancy framing. We really don't have anything else. We have a domed drywall roof, and that's pretty much it, as this report tells you, of what it would cost to get there. So our feeling on the matter, or our thought on the matter, really was it probably, at a certain number would make sense, but it sounds, and I haven't seen, you know, digested all of that detail that you guys just got, but we were a little leery that it wasn't going to take very long for it to climb too far before it just didn't make sense. You know, this board wanted us to look at it, and quite frankly, our intent is to work with you guys as good as we possibly can. If there's information that you want in a project you're interested in, you know, then Lynn has done that and done the due diligence. But we were a little bit leery going in of where it was going to shake out.
What's the timeline of replacing Central Cabarrus High School? Depends on when you get the money, I know, but
we have put that on our current list. The most recent meeting that we had, our chair, vice chair meeting, that we did a joint meeting with Kannapolis City Schools and Rowan Cabarrus Community College, that was on the list of our capital projects.
Is it going back in the same location?
Well, I can tell you my personal opinion on that, but that's not speaking for the board. So I would tell you, we have not had a discussion on that as a board. It's the property's big enough that it makes the most sense probably to reuse the property that we have and figure out a way to place the school without displacing students. But we have not had any formal discussion on that.
Okay.
But that is on our radar. I mean, quite frankly, it's old. It has a lot of needs. It sounds like you saw some of that today, and it clearly does have needs, as do numerous schools that we have.
What did we just spend on replacing the windows?
I want to say, I don't remember the exact figure in front of me, but I want to say somewhere in the range. So I do have the exact figure. Just one second. Yeah. About total about $525,000 for that portion of the work. We also remodeled the office areas for an additional $150,000. So we have invested some funds, and I think there is some discussion about how to look at that building and reuse as much as we can, but there are also other parts of the building that really should not be reused due to their construction type.
When I was out there at the facility today, I saw that, I mean, they have some real needs out there that have not been addressed for really several years, and this does not seem to be a need at all. It seems to be a want, and I think we've got to reprioritize our money to address their needs out there. And I'm curious if anybody's talked to Principal Reimer about, whether this is something that she would like to have, or, whether there are other needs at her school that she feels like could be a more efficient use of this money.
We talked with the principals, certainly. I think when this was first proposed, and it was really coming from the commissioners, we approached her in that respect and said, Principal, do you have any objections to this being done, spending the funds and revitalizing the planetarium? And certainly in light of the way it was coming to us at that point, she didn't have objections. I can agree with you, though, that I think if asked today, would you rate this as the first priority versus something else for your school? She'd probably have a handful of other priorities, no doubt. And I think I agree with Mr. Kiger. I think that you ask any teacher, or any principal rather, from the older three high schools, and they all have their list of real needs over and above wants.
I think the general consensus of our board would probably be, not the answer for Principal Reimer, but if that's her feeling, we would much rather provide her with things that she thinks she needs or wants to do to continue her educational charge versus a project that, again, it would really be a neat thing to have if we were flush in cash and had all this other stuff that we were caught up on, but that not being the case. And again, I'm just one of my board, but that's been the general tone of our discussions. And you are correct. There are needs at Central Cabarrus. One thing I would like to point out, sometimes it is difficult to point at a school and say, well, they got X, Y, Z, and then this school got X, Y, Z, especially with QSCB, because those were monies that had specific rules tied to them, and one of them is an academic component, so that the gym, for example, at Northwest Cabarrus has PE classes in it. So that's why it qualified, where, a field house doesn't. And so some of that, it's tough. And it is also very difficult if you're at a site that they have needs, of prioritizing those versus other needs at another site somewhere else. So that's part of what we juggle. And you guys do the same thing here on a different level.
Well, when you look at the QSCB list, there's also chiller and controls at Central, electrical vault code upgrades, servers, switches, wireless, and wiring. So it was really close to about $2 million of QSCB was spent at Central. I don't want to just say that it was the windows in the office.
Oh,
You
no,
did the
no,
other
there was
the other
quite a bit more, you're right.
mechanicals too. So
And one of the things that we've discussed is it comes a point where you've done this, well, how far do you keep going before you just switch over to, we really should be advocating for replacing the school? There's a point of no return there. I think what we've done has been prudent with the things that were needed, but we're kind of at that point, and that's why it's now on that capital list.
Some of the hardware we can recapture and relocate to new buildings, windows and doors, probably not as much, but certainly the cooling tower, the chiller, the wireless system, a lot of that can be removed from the structure and reused, so.
my only other comment would be at the cost of $45 to $55 million for a new high school is what you had in the list, even if it's put right back on Central. From the discussions we've had the last few years, the elementary school is number one, and Mount Pleasant Middle School is pretty high up on the list. I believe it was 2, and that it falls before Central. So
I think we were calling it 2A and 2B.
and I don't personally think there's enough money in there to do all 3 of those projects that we would be able to afford based on our 5-year plan. But I think, Jason, I think you're correct that the people that live in that building are the ones that can better tell us what needs to happen in there. I've been in the building quite a few times. I don't know if it's Northwest got a new science wing. I don't know if that's the idea, is that it needs more classroom space that could be added on. The cafeteria is lacking. That's a nice way of putting it. It's really got the commons area for the fast food line. I mean, I don't know how that would be done at a building the way that one's shaped and where they're located, but I think it would be good to ask Ms. Reimer and probably her leadership team to weigh in and get some feedback, just like you said, on what they think their top educational needs are at that facility. $45–55 million is a whole lot of money to replace a school with. When you look at all the other, as you said, the roofs and everything else, I mean, that'd be the only thing you'd get done. You wouldn't get anything else done. And at least that hasn't been the discussion up to this point, really, was to make that your number 1 project. So
I think, Chairman Poole, you're absolutely correct on the information, data gathering that we've gotten from ORAD, and it has squarely pointed at a new elementary school, and that's our number 1 project, just looking at trends and where we are.
One other thing that I will offer as an observation on older schools like Central, Concord, and Northwest, as we get further down the road, these buildings are aging rapidly and their systems are aging rapidly, and they certainly have their limitations. I think we're at a point where we really have to start investing some money in planning so that we have design firms looking at the overall master planning of the facilities. In the case of Central, I think you need to study what can be done there in terms of whether it's a phased replacement or complete replacement and how that happens. And I'm not talking about when, but it's more how, because if you know how, then you can plan for the when. And we haven't done that master planning yet, and the same thing is true of many of our other older schools. And that really needs to be a part of our 5-year planning and an effort that needs to be done at some point. So.
no, I think that's an excellent point, because we spend so much time coming up with a project, or I should say you spend a lot of time coming up with a project, and you have some general ideas and, some idea of what a school's going to cost based on either what you've done or what somebody else recently has done. But until you can hire an architect, get some plans drawn, and actually start having some people look at it, you really don't know how close you are. And easily, you can be off a few $1 million.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
if you're looking at a bond referendum or QSCB projects, it's all of a sudden we're eliminating things because you just didn't realize that the cost of a roof has gone up so much. And you can't know that until you start bidding it. I can tell you, I think you can do it for this, but until you're going to make me sign something, I'm not going to spend all my time trying to decide what's going to cost until I know there's actually some money behind it. So I think to me, that would make sense if the school board could, and I don't know how you come up with who would do that or who you could hire that could do a report. There's a Mount Pleasant Middle School report that was done, 8-10 years ago. It's probably still fairly valid as far as that one goes. But, you don't want to do a report and then let it just sit there for that length of time. We need to be in a position where we can move on it once you get the data, because then it just gets old and it's not as valid either. Some of the things about the Mount Pleasant Middle School report are probably still good, some of it's not. But I think that would make sense if we can kind of add that, if you'll put that down and kind of add that to start thinking about what that would look like and how much money that would cost to try to get a true evaluation of Central Cabarrus. And I don't know which other schools would be able to be renovated, and what that would look like. And like you said, how you would phase it. So I think that's a good suggestion too. Anything else about the planetarium? Any questions, other questions you need them to get? Do we want to do you want them to, you think it's about 2:30? Do you want to kind of keep that in our mind? Do we want to go forward with anything? Or is there anything else that you need? We don't have it on for action this month, but
I would
might you
say,
be able to give them some direction?
I would say go talk to the principal and see what her wishes are.
Okay. Anything else?
And I would say what I said before, hear from the school board, what they think we should do. And thank you for hopping in the hot seat and answering those questions. You do not have an easy job, and I appreciate what you do, both of you.
Thank you.
I would say also that sometimes being new gives you a different perspective. And so in the past week, I went to Jan Robinson for the Richard Hudson event, and then I went to Central Cabarrus just to speak with them. And the facilities were just drastically different. And I don't know how fair that is to the students that go to both of those facilities. And as we start looking at building new schools, and we've got 3 big schools, 1, 2, and 2A, perhaps it would be a better investment of the county's money if, instead of building a new school with all of the needs and all of the wants, we build it with all of the needs and some of the wants, and take some of the money for the wants that we were going to put at the new school and renovate some of our old schools to keep them more closely aligned, because the difference between the 2 schools was just drastic, and it caught me quite off guard, to be honest with you.
Well, I think that's a good point, and I think we've been willing to look and explore different ways of doing things, and I think you're right. Sometimes when you do get a different perspective, and the reality of a building built in 1967 versus one that got opened in 2000, it is going to be stark, and there are times when we have to think about those things, and there's other times that we have to think about what's going on inside the building. And sometimes what goes on inside the building, the classroom and the academic piece, you have to make sure that is taken care of, and it feels like it sometimes at the detriment to the physical nature of the structure. And quite frankly, we would like to be able to do both. We know, Mr. Commissioner Morris said we have a difficult job. You guys, your job's very difficult. There's a finite number of dollars to go around, and we're not the only ones here at the table. Although we have a big portion of it, and our duty is to try to provide the best that we can for the school system, and ask you guys for those funds. But we certainly full well know that there's multiple people asking, and that's where you guys have to juggle just like we do. But I think you make a good point to try to look at different ways of trying to get some things done, and we're open to that, and I think we have been.
I would add to that I think you're fighting a battle that you're never going to win. If we build a brand-new high school at Central Cabarrus tomorrow, 10 years from now, then you're going to make the same comment going from Central to J.N. Robinson.
Yep.
A vast difference, so I don't know how you ever solve that problem, to have brand spanking new state-of-the-art facilities for every student in the entire system. There's always going to be some discrepancies from one to the other. I go back to some of the schools that I attended, and I'm somewhat insulted that they have torn them down and replaced them. I thought they were still new. Yeah, so it's a chore.
Hi, thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Next items, 4.1 and 4.2, we're going to move to the October meeting. So Londa Strong is here for Active Living and Parks to talk about matching incentive grant recommendations.
In addition to the information that was on the agenda request, there are just a few things that I would like to add, just a little bit more information about the program. The Matching Incentive Grant Program provides seed monies for civic and community organizations to develop, build, or renovate park and recreation facilities. These facilities need to be on county-owned, school-owned, or municipality-owned properties, or leased to either of those for a minimum of 25 years. I went into a little bit more detail on the agenda request and gave you the information as to how much was requested for this year, and we did have $50,000 in the budget. Something that I found interesting when looking over some of the old information is this program began in 1977, and the first year's grants were a little over $28,000. 21,000 of that came from the county. So there's a little over $7,000, and it was all athletic facilities. And in those first few years, that's what it was. But there really wasn't a whole lot more available then other than a few playgrounds and the athletic facilities. Since the program began in 1977, a little over $4 million worth of projects have been put on school or county properties at a cost of $1.8 million to the county. And the reason there's a difference, it's because this is a match, a dollar-for-dollar match, is that the organizations put in more money to make the project complete. The process for the application process is a 45-day process. Usually starts around the 1st of May, goes through the middle of June. The applicants then come to our Active Living and Park Commission meeting to make a presentation to our commission. The property committee will then review those and make recommendations that go back to the full board. And Blake Kiger is the chairman. He is the chairman of our property committee, and the property committee is the one that goes over, reviews, and make recommendations. And so I have Blake here to go over what was requested this year and their recommendations.
Thank you, Londa. We received our presentations. Do they have this piece of paper?
Yes, they do.
Okay. I won't bore you with going down and reading each project since you have it in front of you, but we had an excellent group of presenters. The property committee met. The total ask was $72,132, which was greater than the 50 that we had. So everything that you see in green, we decided we wanted to fund in full. The one note I would like to point out on the Northwest Cabarrus Middle High School where it says renovation of community track, that's actually the school track, but the community, they demonstrated that it's used by the community and not just the school. So it's not a separate track away from the school. It is the school's track, but there's a lot of community use. Since the thought process of the property committee was that was the largest ask of the group, so the shortfall needed to come out of that group, if that makes sense. So when we had to find money to pull back, that's where it came from. And then the bottom one in blue, we just had some discussion about where they were in the process. great project. We hope it works out. Somewhere down the road, we feel certain it's going to come back to us. It just didn't rise to the level of the recommendation of our committee in this particular order. So with that said, there's a total of 50,000 in projects, and I'll point out I'm thrilled and thankful that a lot of them go to PTOs, schools, school parks. That's just a wonderful piece of the puzzle for me. But all of the projects help make Cabarrus County a better place to live. So anyway, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. But that was the recommendation of our committee back to the commission board, and the commission board voted unanimously to accept the property committee's recommendation.
Okay, are there any questions concerning any of the projects?
I have one note before questions, please, just to elaborate a little bit on the Rotary Club, grant. In our grant application, we had requirements that you must have 3 bids for whatever the project is, 3 bids, and be ready to bid the project, have architectural drawings or renderings or whatever it might be, and, excuse me, and at this point, they did not have that. So I just wanted to clarify that they didn't quite meet the minimum to have a legitimate contract
Thank you.
application.
Thank you for that.
Is that the Rotary Square
Yes,
project? Okay, because they also have, I
The
guess,
the
maybe it's a
tournament
different
disc
Rotary
golf.
Club.
right,
Yeah.
different Rotary Club,
Okay.
that's correct.
I forgot there's more than one.
And Byron Hagler is our staff representative who works with those grants, and he is here also. So if anybody has a specific question, he knows them a whole lot more detailed than Blake and I do. So if anybody has a specific question, he'll be glad to answer.
Okay, are there any questions or comments?
What about the other Rotary Club? Do they have their act together?
They did.
Yeah.
They had their,
I will disclose that I'm a member of that club, so in case that comes up in our voting decisions. But what financial contribution are they making to this project?
it is, they will pay for everything, which I believe is a total of a $30,000 project. They will pay for everything above this grant. Of course, it is at Franklin Park, so the land is being provided by us.
Right. So we pay 10 and
They'll
get
pay
30.
20, correct.
It's a pretty good deal. Yeah. And that's true of all of these?
That's correct.
Yes.
And they have to demonstrate that they have the money in hand. So it's not, yeah, we'll get around to paying for it sometime later. They have it, and that goes into our consideration.
We ask for a bank statement. We have, if it's on a school, we have the school, Mr. Whitkey or,
Mr. Burnett?
yeah, Burnett, yeah, they have to sign off, as well as the principal of the school. So it's not like the PTO just decides, hey, we want to put this beach volleyball court out here at Mount Pleasant High School, let's do a grant, and then you get ready to build it. And the principal says, where's this coming from? And Mr. Whitkey says, what are you thinking about? So we have the whole process that they have to go through. That's why they have as many days as they do to get the information together and ready, because they have to go to a lot of different people. Not that they do it early, they all wait till the last minute. You can ask Mr. Whitkey as he's trying to sign all of them on the last day.
I got a question. Whenever you had mentioned in the past, this is, program's been in effect since the 70s. You said there's been $4 million worth of investment. What are some of the projects that maybe we see every day or when we go to the park and we're just unaware?
Oh, yeah, it's amazing how many. Actually, I have a summary here of all of them. That's double-sided, too, of all the projects. But most of the elementary school ball field lights
Right.
came from the incentive grant projects. A lot of the concession stands and restroom buildings, a lot of walking tracks, especially at the new elementary schools. The paved walking trails have been put in at A.T. Allen, Boger, Weddington Hills, and Weddington Hills has done the great environmental education program out there with theirs, not just the walking trail. Playgrounds all around the
Right.
county. So
Okay.
you have a wide variety.
Right. I think it's a very good program, so, I think it's great. I would like to see
I'll be
that
glad to.
list. If you could send that to me.
I will.
Just out of curiosity. I'm sure there's a lot of things that we see or use that we just don't realize that we're part of this
Definitely.
program.
So do you ever get any criticism from any of the groups that you kind of pick and choose and do projects only for the ones that have money to contribute, and maybe some of the less fortunate areas or less aggressive areas get overlooked because they're not getting this incentive.
Well, that's one of the things that over the years we have tried to encourage these groups to do. When somebody comes and says, so-and-so has a new bathroom and lights at their ball fields, we don't have anything. Well, most of that came through the incentive grant program, and they provided half of the money, and in most of those cases, they provided about 3/4 of the money and/or labor. And we try to use it as an incentive to get them to go do something so that their facilities can be improved. So when they complain, we try to turn that around and make it a positive. So, but yes, we do have people that say, well, why can't we have this? Because they don't understand where it came from. They think we just went over there and built it for them.
Yeah, so they get the impression that we're picking and choosing who's going to get the better facilities.
Until they come in, when they complain, and
Yeah.
then we try to educate them to let them know what is available. And most of the time, we do have them to come back, even if it's for a small request. A lot of the schools 25 years ago did $1,000 requests, because that was all the money they had. But then once they realized the importance of it and how they could get $2,000 worth of money for that $1,000, they started turning into $10,000 and $20,000 and $30,000 projects. Weddington Hills, you can use as an example. They've probably spent, I could look on there, but it would take too long. I would guess just in the last 10 years, $35,000 just on that trail and environmental education area through the county.
58,000.
58,000.
58,550.
I was trying to be conservative. 58,000, and that's just on our side. Then they've gotten grants from other groups. I know Concord Garden Club is one of them that they get every year to beautify the area, and they've done some of the recreation trails programs through the state to get money. They probably have well over $150,000 in what's happened out there at our 58,000.
And what I would like to point out, and this is important to commend Londa and her staff, and Byron in particular, when, it's not so rigid when they submit something that, oh, well, sorry, you just didn't make the cut, and you kick them to the curb. Byron will painstakingly work with them, almost to a fault, of trying, and he's probably got one group in mind now as I'm speaking about it, that it's kind of like you have to hold their hand to make sure the grant's written correctly or whatever, but we want them to succeed and we want them to be part of the process, and he does a fabulous job of pulling that together so that we don't have somebody that goes away, mad that they didn't get picked. But
Well, I applaud you. I think it's a great program. Somebody was describing to me incentives for the film industry the other day, and their description was, I will give you $1,000, but with only one stipulation. You give me $100 back. You get to keep $900, and that's kind of the same way this operates. So I think it's doing what we want it to do, and I'm glad that you do offer the flexibility to work with folks and help make it successful. I think that's what we're supposed to do. Thank you.
And on our side, it is all dollar-for-dollar match. We do not count in-kind services. If they want to do something above and beyond that, then that's fine, but we do strict dollar-for-dollar.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is amending our meeting schedule. Whenever, obviously we know this, whenever 3 of us or more are meeting together to conduct county business, we have to notify the public. And so we have a mini retreat scheduled right now for October 10th. Is that still at 2 o'clock?
Yeah, I think Mr. Birch is the only one we haven't confirmed with you, I believe. Pick a date, okay. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't a bad one. So yes, we're good.
And
on
it's
October
2 o'clock, isn't it?
10th. What? Oh, Chris, you're good. Yeah, what we were proposing was 4 to 6 hours. That's up to you guys. Maybe 2 to 8 or 2 to 6. If that time of day is in agreement with your schedules. and just some of the things that I was proposing that we would talk to. Of course, I'm taking any suggestions from you guys. If you don't have anything tonight that you want to submit, but just let me know. One is school and county capital needs. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, but actually drill down on some of those and what are those potential funding mechanisms that you can use once you establish a list, or the different agencies establish a priority list. What are your options, and how much do you wish to pursue? And then economic development. I know there's been a lot of discussion there. Right now there is a policy in place. What do we do? What do you? How do you want to direct the staff? Are there some changes that you want to see? That type of thing, just to give us some direction, and that we can in turn give Margie and her group with the Economic Development Corporation and their board some direction on how you guys want to proceed with that. And then just some general updates for Commissioner Osterreich's purposes, just to go over a little bit. We're going to talk a lot about the budget here in a short time, but also maybe bring in some department heads, some of the bigger department heads, and just go over some general government activities, what's out there, what are we doing, why are we doing it, and then get some suggestions, make sure, sort of a checkup for us, are we still going in the right direction, or do you want us to focus in another area? So 4 to 6 hours. We'll plan for 6. We'll go ahead and start putting some of the stuff in there. If it doesn't look like there's going to be 6 hours, we'll let you know. Again, feel free to submit some suggestions on topics that you want to talk about. So that's it.
Okay.
And most likely we'll just do that in this room here.
Okay, the next item is Public Safety Emergency Communication System.
Have Sergeant, right? Sergeant? Yes, sir. Okay, Sergeant Johnson's here to talk a little bit about the radio system. As you know, you approved and funded a P25 digital system to enhance our old and sort of antiquated system before that was 100% analog and was experiencing a lot of problems. So we joined in with the City of Concord and the City of Kannapolis, and we joined the regional system with Charlotte-Mecklenburg, as well as Union County's part of that, Gastonia, and understand Stanley's getting in the process of moving in that direction. However, when we did that original transition, we transitioned six of the 12 channels that we have. 6 are running on a digital format. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the others are 6 analog. So I'll let Sergeant Johnson talk about the technical side of things, and then I'll talk to you about the contractual and the cost of the project.
So just basically, like Mr. Down said, last year through a grant, we purchased the first 6 of the 12 channels. That moved all of public safety to those first 6 channels, leaving public service on the older system. With the recent storms that we've had, we've experienced some capacity issues. So the need is there. I mean, it was always in the plan to get these other 6 channels and to move public service over. It's just, I think, kind of heightened the need to go ahead and get that done. And I think that's where we're at, to finish out the system with the remaining 6 channels, which will move public service over to the same platform, update the system. The cost savings would be maintaining 1 system instead of 2. So.
Yeah, as Sergeant Johnson said, capacity issues, meaning especially during these floods that we've had here lately, there's been a lot of people calling 911. Some of it was reporting power outages, some was personal flooding in their areas, some of it was emergency traffic, and it was getting bogged down the 6 channels that we had. So we reached that capacity a little sooner than we thought. The engineers had sort of estimated or guesstimated that with our current traffic at the time, the 6 channels would have lasted a little longer, or at least been able to handle the traffic. However, our system at the time was so antiquated, we probably weren't getting the best of numbers for them to even interpret. So what we're proposing to do is contract with Motorola to provide those 6 additional channels at a, I think it's on your sheet there. The cost to add these 6 additional channels is $1,169,975. We currently have an interlocal agreement with the City of Concord and Kannapolis, and our attorney is looking at that. If it needs to be updated, we're massaging this contract as well. It's in there, but it's a 40-40-20 split. The county pays 40%, the City of Concord pays 40%, and the City of Kannapolis pays 20%. And that's based on the size of our systems and the number of towers that we have. So our match on that was, I apologize, $467,990. It is a budgeted item. It is in this current year budget. So it's there. We just wanted to let you know why we're doing it, and simply we're not just expanding because the money's in the budget. There is a need, and again, your direction of allowing us to move into this regional system has already paid for itself a couple of times with the grants that we were able to secure, or Charlotte has secured for us through them. So we've done that. In fact, we thought that these second 6 channels were going to be much more than they actually ended up being as well. So not only did we experience some savings on the first channel, we're also first 6 channels, but also these remaining 6. So if you have any questions, we can, again, explain a little bit more what this is. It's not the hardware, software. What is it? Hardware, software? What is it? Phone system?
So it's basically the radio channel, call them a CPU, kind of like similar to what a computer would be. We bought on the first 6 channels, we bought the rack and the hardware, and we're just basically expanding, going back into those racks with 6 more computers, which basically becomes those 6 channels and gives you 6 more talk paths to occur on a
what does that mean? How many people can talk on 12 channels?
So if you got 12 channels, 1 channel is a data channel, so you can have 11 simultaneous conversations happening at the same time. So what we were doing during those floods and some of the storms is there were more than 5 conversations happening at the same time, so people were getting busy. This will bump us up and where you can have the 11 conversations at the same time.
Well, I know it's sounds like a complicated system, but I participated in ride along with one of the officers during one of the storms, and I can attest that it was a backlog and it was busy signal, and so I certainly seen firsthand, that it is necessary, and especially it was one of the worst storms we had, so the communication, was hindered. So, I certainly see the need.
Mike, if this phase 2 comes in under budget, as you mentioned, will they return the budgeted money back to the county, or what happens to that money that's the savings?
It just won't be expended, so it would stay where it's at in the budget.
Does it stays in our budget or in the sheriff's budget?
It's in our budget. It's in your capital. It's in the capital improvement. Yeah. So we would only expend what those invoices are. The rest of it will stay there for a future project or a future use.
Thanks.
So I think it's not a sheriff's office project. I'm just the implementer.
Yeah.
So it's a countywide project.
Do you know about how much that would be?
It was a couple $100,000.
I think it was $520,000 in the budget. Yeah, Ann's
Yeah.
shaking her head. It was $520 that was in the budget for that project.
So about $60,000 in savings.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Next we have Ann Wilson. She's back here. Finance reappropriation of funds for ongoing projects.
Good afternoon. Every year, usually in August, we come to you with some reappropriations that relate to services in general, and then after we get a better handle on things in September, the grants, we come to you and talk to you about the grants that need to be reappropriated. So I'm here to talk about the grants that need to be reappropriated. We have some emergency management grants, some human services grants, active living and parks grants, the sheriff's SCAP grant, some, it says landfill, but it's really recycling grants. There was a little bit of money in JAG and a donation for the DARE program. What these are restricted funds that need to be carried over to be spent in accordance with their grant requirements. And the total amount is $408,975. Some will be going to the landfill fund of $98,000, so it affects the general fund by $311,456. And what we'll need is a motion to approve the budget amendment at the meeting. Any questions? Thank you.
And these are items that we just didn't get them done
Correct.
by the end of the fiscal year.
They were
so.
budgeted in 13, and we didn't get to accomplish the goals yet, and so we're reappropriating in 14 to accomplish the goals.
Are there any questions from anybody? Okay.
Thank you.
Next, we have Susan Farrington, also from Finance, Small Projects Fund Budget Adjustments and Updated Capital Project Ordinance.
My agenda item involves making adjustments to the Small Projects Fund and updating the project ordinance that goes along with it. One of the things that I want to talk about is the Harvest Facility Project. It's been completed, and we just need to adjust our budget to make the revenues and expenditures equal. And then there's a $49,000 remaining in the fund, which will go back to the general fund, which is in accordance with the project ordinance. At the completion of each fund project, money goes back to the general fund. So the Harvest Facility Project, like I said, has been completed. And then the second part is the Elma C. Lomax operations has been recorded is now going to be recorded in the general fund. And so in the Small Projects Fund, we only want to leave behind the capital improvements that might possibly be made in the future. So we'll leave a little bit of money there left in that fund. The rest of the money will go back to the general fund where the operations will be held there in the general fund from now on. The last part is the deferred tax and deferred tax interest. And the amount, and we've used a little bit of the money for the Harvest Facility and for the Elma C. Lomax farm in the past. And now the money will remain in the Small Projects Fund for future agricultural preservation projects. So in a summary, the agenda item is to fix the budgets to make the revenues and expenditures equal and to update our project ordinance for these items.
Okay, are there any questions concerning this item? Okay, thank you, Susan. Next, we have Kyle Billifer to talk about the Concord Senior Center addition and / renovations bid award.
Good evening. 4 sealed bids from informal bidding were solicited for the Concord Senior Center addition and renovations. They were received on August 14th, 2013. Staff has reviewed the submissions, and a summary tabulation is attached. It's actually the next sheet. Ike's Construction was the low bidder for a cost of $315,064. That was a base bid of $310,664 with alternates totaling $4,400. The budget for the construction portion of this project is $326,000. Therefore, the base bid and the alternates are below the budgeted amount. The requested action is to motion to approve the bid award and authorize the county manager to execute a contract between Cabarrus County and Ike's Construction, subject to review and revision by the county attorney. I can answer any questions about the project or the alternates. This project was brought to you a few times. The last time was in March when it was given the approval to go ahead and get a bid.
Why is alternate number 7 on Ike's bid $2,200 and the others was $300, $400, and $500? Is that a special window they're putting in or something out there?
Some of them are, yeah. The number 7 alternate is because it's going to have to be a fire-rated wall. The reason that was asked for is the area that's going into is what is going to be an expansion of the fitness room.
I thought it was a window been cut through, wasn't it?
For alternate number 7?
Yeah.
It's an actual fitness room interior window. So if you're in the lobby of the senior center, You're looking into the fitness room now. Do you know where the fitness room is there, kind of in the glass bubble? All of that is going to be drywall. It's going to be a fire-rated wall, and to put a special fire-rated window in there, it was going to be pretty expensive. We spoke with the safety department and the active living and parks, and they felt for safety's sake, in case they needed to be able to see if one of their citizens had a medical issue or something like that, they wanted to be able to see in there.
But these other people wasn't bidding on the same thing?
I don't think they really looked that particular about what the rating was going to have to be on the window, if you want me to be honest with you. We looked at the discrepancies in the alternates, and that was exactly what we thought, is they didn't realize it was going to have to be fire rated.
How big is the window?
Yeah, 4x4.
Could you just briefly talk about what the project is, because Jason wasn't here at the
Sure.
time?
Sure.
I mean, we talked about it a lot, but so that he'll know exactly what we're doing there at the senior center.
The addition is about 1,200 square feet, and that will be, if you're facing the Concord Senior Center, be on the right-hand side, and that will be a wooden athletic floor similar to what we did to the scat room on the 7th floor of the sheriff's admin. That's where they'll have a lot of their multi-use fitness classes, so yoga, dancing, all sorts of stuff like that. And then there'll be renovations to a current computer room and to their current fitness rooms. And to bring it up to code, we'll have to create 2 new bathrooms. That facility, we're using the one-time exclusion rule for the building code to add on. This will be the only time that you can add on to that building. We can only do up to 25% of the entire square footage.
That was a request from them because of the expanding senior citizen group of people who were out there using the facility. And they
Correct.
felt like they were limited, so we were trying to find a way to give them some more space, most economically
We met
possible.
with the
We
senior.
started, I think it was twice this. When we
Yes.
were first starting out, it
Yes.
was looking pretty expensive.
Yeah, I've met with the senior advisory board twice and gone through all the plans, and we've received a letter from them that says they support the project. The problem with that facility is it's pretty much landlocked in between rock and swamp, so there wasn't so much that we could expand.
Any other questions concerning this project? Jason, does that help?
Yes,
Do you have any other questions? We've gone over it a bunch of times, but I know it's new for you probably, so I just want to make sure that you understood. And it's always good for everybody that listens to this meeting to kind of get a refresher on what we're doing, so.
If you have any further questions, I can send you layouts or prints. I've just presented them so many times, I didn't attach them to this agenda item, but what? Sure.
And they'll be happy if you come by and visit.
That's on our next tour.
Oh, that's on your next tour. okay.
In the front lobby, there's we had a large print mounted for him and put on an easel that shows what the layout is going to be.
Okay. Let's see, the next item, the old jail demolition is going to be moved to October, correct? Do you want to explain why?
Correct. For the actual renovations of the courthouse annex, we only received 2 bids. By law, for formal bidding, you have to have 3. So we had to extend, and also by general statute, if we don't get 3 bids this next time, we can take the lower of 2 bids. But by law, we had to give another opportunity.
So have you advertised for that yet? Or
Yes, over and over
what
and
are the
over again.
dates? I mean, here's your chance to,
Yeah,
if anybody's.
September 18th at 2 p.m. is the deadline.
Can you talk a little bit about the project and why, this is a very complicated project, and then that probably explains why we didn't get the bids that were there, if you can just.
Correct. It was actually bid 3 separate ways. It was bid as just the demo of the 1986 portion, which is the portion that juts out towards Church Street. Then there was bid as the renovations of what is known as the old Sheriff's Department, which is the 1971 portion. And then you were allowed to bid on a combination of both projects, as some general contractors that are that large might want to do both of the projects and would cut down on their mobilization costs if they were able to bid them together. We did receive enough bids on the demolition part, but we did not receive it on the actual renovations part. The reason that building, or actually 3 buildings, is so complicated is they're all integrated and connected to each other, whether it be with certain utilities, certain water lines, certain HVAC, certain security systems. All of it started at one end and went through the whole building. So we have spent a considerable number of man-hours and dollars already trying to separate all those utilities from door controls that you have when you actually are taking the inmate from the jail across the street, underground, up an elevator, through a back hallway, and into the back corridor of the second floor of the courthouse. So we have had to separate a lot of those systems to allow the operations to continue and to actually do the demolition. What most people don't know is the old sheriff's department, which is the middle portion of that building across the street, actually is a shared wall with the basement of the courthouse. So if you were trying to tear the whole thing down, you would expose the actual basement of the courthouse. So engineering-wise, it was extremely difficult to do. There would also be issues with the tunnel that we put underneath the ground that comes from the jail or jail annex over to the courthouse. So this has been a pretty complicated engineering project to do. In fact, the prints are extensive at best in terms of following it and understanding exactly the phasing of the process and what you're going to have to do.
So the bids are due to you, again, when's, is this bid opening?
September 18th at 2 p.m. and
Here?
Yes, in the actual Board of Commissioners room.
And the only bid you got was for demolition?
No, I got bids for all of them, but you have to have 3 for it to be legal
Oh,
when
you
it's
got the
formal
fair
bidding.
one.
Now,
Did
the second time.
Did the ones you got coming on the budget?
Yes. Yeah, well, no, I can't open them. I can't
you
open
can't-
anything.
okay,
If
I
it's
got you.
not, if it's not legal, I can't open anything. So, but now by law, as soon as it's bid the second time, if we still only receive 2, we can. What's odd is we received plenty of pre-qualification packages and had plenty of open houses and meetings. Michael has been the main one, but we've probably held 7 to 8 open houses with contractors and subcontractors, a lot of time after hours, after 5 o'clock, because some of the work is actually going to affect the courthouse during actual hours, so I can't get in there and show them everything while court's going on.
Okay. Now, were the current bids that you got, you just hold on to those?
No, by law, you have to give them back.
And then they have to
That
turn
is
around and give
correct.
them back to you?
That is correct. And the reason we gave all of them back was because we obviously by bidding it a third way of combining the construction or the renovations and the demolition, you think you're going to drive your costs down. So I didn't want to hold on to something and end up shooting myself in the foot by raising the cost. So we gave them all back.
Okay, thank you for that. So we'll put that on for October then. Okay, thank you. The next item we have is Todd Shanley from IT to talk about multifunctional print services contract.
I'm here today to talk to you about the multifunctional printers, which most of us know them as copiers. So we are coming to the end of our 5-year lease. We spent basically the last 9 to 12 months working on evaluating the current status of our fleet, looking for cost savings, and came up with 4 goals to achieve in this process. The number one was to reduce our contract cost. You'll see in the presentation that I think we've succeeded in doing so. We've done that through a couple of different ways. Reducing the click charge is the number one way we've done that. Also, right-sizing the fleet. We've used that phrase a good bit here lately, so it becomes a term that we know, but to be clear, it basically means deleting copiers where they're not used, a reduction of a copier where it's not needed, or the reduction of functionality. One good example is you all use iPads now rather than the large booklet agendas, so we don't have to have that large copier that you see in the county manager's office anymore. That one will shrink considerably due to the volume that it does now. So that was an area that we were able to see some reduction. Increased accountability and reducing waste was another area. So our plan is to incorporate using our ID badges as a way to swipe, so there'll be accountability down to the person rather than just down to the department level that we currently have. Improved security is another, so that is the other, again, using your HID card to swipe will improve that. And then improving productivity for the employees. Currently, we are going paperless in as many locations as we can. Doing so, increasing the functionality at the devices is critical for that. So rather than having to purchase additional scanners for desktop scanning, these new multifunction imaging devices will allow us to do that. So we believe that we've selected a partner that will be able to successfully deliver this project and deliver it at a reduced cost than what we have now. So we're asking you to allow the county manager to execute the contract after a legal review with Sharp Business Systems. And happy to answer any other questions.
Are there any questions? He's become the expert on the copiers.
I have. We've spent a good bit of time. This started with our current vendor coming back and asking us to renew early in the fourth year of our fifth lease. So that's why we spent so much time doing it. But them asking us to do that gave us a good chance to look at it rather than just to renew early and attack it. I think we've attacked it well, and it looks like based on the projections, we should say if volume remains the same, we may save as much as $200,000 over the life of the lease. So it's 5 years.
Is this the same vendor, or is this a new
It
vendor?
is not. It is a new vendor. They're here today as well.
Does anybody have any questions?
So how difficult is it to train everybody to use these devices? Because I don't think I could.
I actually think you would. I think the front of the devices are very much like the iPad you have in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
So they've gone that way. All of the vendors, we spend a significant amount of time with our staff. We set up on the 7th floor in the training room across the street. We invited all of the vendors who that were interested in the project to come in and set up for us. So they had to demonstrate the functionality. So we called it our vendor rodeo. So we had 6 vendors on site for 4 days, working with our staff and proving that they could do what we want them to do, not just we ask a bunch of questions and go through the process. They actually worked with my staff to actually implement the process, and then we invited the entire county staff to make it through. We had just under 100 employees go through, fill out surveys, and provide feedback on specific needs, and ask all the questions. The library has a very different need than the tax department. So being able to get them to give us that feedback in that setting was important. And then again, me and my staff making the decision on right sizing wasn't going to be, I could just look at the volumes and say, okay, well, you don't need a copier, you do need a copier, that type of thing. So getting that feedback from the staff was pretty important for this process.
It looks like an impressive process.
Just out of curiosity, how many devices?
We have about 70 in the county.
Okay.
Are we keeping 70, or we're?
Yeah, no, we're still in that final stage of that process. So I think we're going to drop a total of 3 copiers. Some of the copiers are actually one for like the Sheriff's Department Records Division. Rather than having one unit that was a certain size, it actually made more sense for them to have 2 units, and that cost kind of broke out a little bit better. So the maybe dropping a couple pages per minute, that sacrifice, but getting them the actual functionality that they were looking for is how we've attacked the problem.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we've got Susie Morris from Planning and Development to talk about proposed text amendments.
Good afternoon. What you have in front of you is a total of 4 different chapters that are being amended. The first chapter that we are looking at is Chapter 2, which is clarifications of definitions. There was a session law this past session that caused a change to the definition of bona fide farm. It now has to include grain facilities. So we are making that change to be compliant with the statute. We are also adding a definition of brick, of a curtain wall, and split-face block. Those are elsewhere talked about in the ordinance and need to be defined in Chapter 2 for the definitions. And then our recreational vehicle definition was not consistent with the definition in Chapter 4, so we are also changing that. So some very minor changes to Chapter 2, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. For Chapter 4, this is our chapter that deals with overlay districts. Mainly what is happening in this chapter is we are removing outdated material. We currently have a Reimertown overlay. That overlay is no longer needed. We have area plans and have also made changes to our ordinance that address what that overlay addressed at that time. In the manufactured home overlay, we are addressing some, again, outdated language. There are some references in there that HUD does not use anymore. There was a classification of manufactured housing. Now it's either single section or multi-section housing. So we're changing that so that that will be consistent. And then the other area that really needs to be overhauled is the airport overlay. The city of Concord actually drives the bus on that and how that is regulated and also the language. So this language would bring our language up to date with the language that they currently have in our ordinance. It also would say that as part of a review, it does have to include the city of Concord's airport director and development services, because they will go in and actually measure the height of a project if it's in that overlay and determine whether or not it is appropriate based on FCC regulations and safety. So that's Chapter 4. Any questions? Chapter 8, for those of you who just went through the rewrite of Chapter 8, we need to change number 36, which is our wireless telecommunications services chapter. This is because of a session law change, which was an act to facilitate the deployment of mobile, broadband, and other enhanced wireless communications. Essentially what this did is it came in and it changed some of the definitions. So we are updating the definitions. It also changed the process for review. So some things that were subject to review in the past at the Board of Adjustment level are now considered administrative. There is a definition that's called a substantial modification. If something is not a substantial modification, it will no longer have to go to the Board of Adjustment, and there will not be a noticing procedure for that. It will strictly be taken care of in-house. That particular statute change is effective on October 1st of 2013. So I believe we will wait until October 1st to actually change our ordinance. We will have you all go ahead and make the change, but then we will not officially change it until that day. But it is mainly to facilitate a lot of the 4G changes that are happening, and those changes also include some additional height that's needed on the towers. So a lot of more of that will be handled administratively and in-house versus having to go through the conditional use permit process. Any questions on that one? Did you have anything that you wanted to add? No? Okay. And then the last chapter that we're looking at is Chapter 12, which this was the modernization of the Board of Adjustment statutes. There were a lot of changes to this legislation as it was making its way through the process. The end result is that if someone is filing a variance, they will still have that very high voting requirement. So that would be the 80%. Anything else, so now a conditional use permit, a conditional use rezoning, if they're filing a conditional use permit, that would come along with that. That high vote requirement is no longer there. It's just a simple majority. So that is a substantial change to this law that has been put in place. The standards for review for a variance were also changed. It used to be that you had to prove hardship, and in proving hardship, you actually had to prove to the Board of Adjustment that our ordinance rendered your property unusable. That is not the case anymore. There are now 4 standards that have to be applied, and they have to meet all 4 of those standards now to qualify for the variance. It also added a new procedure. If there is a determination that is made regarding a specific property, the property owner is required, not required, they have the option, let me say, of posting a sign on their property that says that that particular decision was made. And if they do that, then that is considered constructive notice. It stays up, I believe, for a period of 10 days. After that, that project can proceed, and there is no appeal process from anyone kind of looking from the outside. So that also is very different. It used to be that if someone received a building permit or some type of a zoning decision, and they waited, say, 2 years until they started to build, when the neighbor saw that they were building, if they wanted to appeal it or if there were questions, they could file at that time. So this also is very different. And then the last significant change that was made with this was about how vacancies are filled on the board. Luckily, we had already written that into our rules and procedures, so we're a little bit ahead of the game on that. We did not necessarily bring all of the statute language in. We, in some cases, made references, in other cases, paraphrased, so that if this changes again, hopefully we won't have to go back and do a lot of rewriting for that chapter. This one also has an effective date of October 1st. And then for all of the chapters, we will fix general typos and then renumber as needed. The Planning and Zoning Commission did look at all of these on August 13th and voted to send each of these text amendments to you all for final consideration, and each of those votes was unanimous, and they did look at each one separately. So the next step would be for you all to have a public hearing at your regular meeting to consider these changes. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I know it's a lot, and I don't know if our attorney has anything to add.
I really don't, except to say that these also were reviewed by an ordinance change subcommittee of the P&Z board, so they've actually been through 2 groups to actually look at them. And as Susie says, with reference to chapters 8 and 12, those changes were basically mandated by state law. So we've just tried to track the statutes basically in those cases, although we don't, particularly in the Board of Adjustment change, we didn't recite the whole statute in our ordinance because of the length of it, and a lot of it related to some legal procedures such as issuance of subpoenas that don't really need to be in our ordinance so long as we reference that it's available under the state statute.
Are there any questions concerning the amendments, the text amendments? And when we do the public hearing, can we do one public hearing on all 4, or do we have to do a public hearing on them individually?
We did advertise it as one case because these are kind of being handled as a batch. So you'll be able to hold just one and take in all the comments.
Okay. Okay. If you have questions between now and, of course, the regular meeting, since there's a lot to that, then I'm sure Susie will be happy to answer them.
Yes, just
She
call
usually
me.
does a good job of that, so thank you.
Thank you.
The next item, Greg Belk, request for approval of final survey of the Cabarrus and Stanley County line.
Good afternoon. Brent is unable to join us due to illness, but in April this year, the Board of Commissioners requested that the survey be completed of the Cabarrus-Stanley County line. That survey was completed in May of this year, and the final plats were submitted to the North Carolina Geodetic Survey. They have reviewed the plats and agreed that they are in accordance with the mapping requirements at that time for that survey. So I've also received a copy, as well as Jonathan, and we have reviewed them with the tax administrator, Brent, and we are ready to move forward with the project and have it adopted as a final survey.
Okay, are there questions concerning this item?
This goes back to, we discussed, there was some confusion of where the county line was, is that correct, from?
Yeah, it's an old county line, has never been surveyed in over 200 years, and
Right.
this
Okay, that's
rectified
what-
that situation.
All right, that's what I thought, just want to make sure.
Are there any structures that are moving from Cabarrus into Stanley or Stanley into Cabarrus?
No, ma'am. We have reviewed all structures that the line crossed, and we're going to leave them as they are now, whether we're assessing or Stanley's assessing. So I think we're in agreement with that, so.
Did you want to add something?
No, it was good. You had requested, of course, we notified all the property owners along that line. We actually held one open house on the Cabarrus County side that we conducted. Stanley County representatives were aware of that, and then Stanley County held a second open house in the town of Locust and attended that one. We had a few people who came to those, and then a number of others who afterward made appointments directly to meet with Greg and go over their specific issues. So I think we've been able to address those, but certainly as they came up, or if they come up, there are any other questions out there, then Greg's been able to answer those.
Jason, did you have any questions on this one? I don't. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jonathan, you have the next one, transfer of tax foreclosure parcel to the City of Concord.
At a number of our meetings, we've discussed that there are properties that, due to back taxes, the county has taken possession of those parcels. This is an extremely small parcel we found. Actually, this one was a tax foreclosure, I believe, dating back to the mid-'90s. But as you can see, it's completely landlocked. It's actually on two sides, that going up to the corner of those two streets. All that property is owned by the City of Concord. So this is less than 1,500 square feet. The statutes do allow us to, or do allow the Board of Commissioners to approve a transfer to another nonprofit, in particular to a municipality. And so what we're proposing is that you transfer this less than 1,500 parcel, 1,500 square foot parcel to the City of Concord for redevelopment purposes.
Are there any questions? Okay.
I guess they wouldn't be interested in purchasing it.
The City of
Yeah,
Concord
that's-
actually is, and we did this in the past, we had some parcels that the county had taken possession of, and in some cases, joint possession with the City of Concord. They had built a house on there, and then that was sold to a private individual and has gone back into the tax rolls.
That's fine. I know it's a small piece of property.
Yeah, and no, we've not found, we have had some luck, actually. We've talked about that we're going to put them on the gov deals, and we've had some luck in selling some of those parcels and getting them back into private ownership. We have 5 more that'll be transferring fairly soon.
They also worked with us on another parcel that we had recently that had some, that we had actually been required to bid in at the tax foreclosure, and it turned out it had a lot of zoning issues on it, and we worked out a number of things with the City of Concord on that.
Okay, good. Thank you. Next item, this one was added, the next page, presentation of estimated year-end projections. Pam Dubois and Ann Wilson is back with us. And Parth. I don't want to forget you.
Good afternoon. What he's passing out, it's 10 pages, and I didn't do them front and back like we normally do because sometimes you need to put both of them in front of you to try to help get through it. What I'm going to try to do is to walk you through how last year wound up, what some of our policies are around fund balance, give you an understanding of the various types of fund balance as the GAAP accounting and the state law requires, so that you can understand what our options are. Does everybody have the handout now? Okay. All righty. On page 1, what I'm starting with is the fund balance from the end of fiscal 12, and that was $76,033,235. This year, the revenues over the expenses, which is the addition to fund balance, was $19,703,589. Later on in the presentation, I'm going to go through exactly how that number comes up in terms of revenues over, expenses under, et cetera. But what that really gives you is an ending total fund balance of $95,736,824. Now, some of that fund balance, there's 5 categories that you will see on our financials, and the first is non-spendable, and that is fund balance that is not cash, so you can't spend it, and that's how it shows on the balance sheet. And that's $240,000 for inventories and $142,000 for some prepaids. Then there's a category called restricted by state statute, and that's primarily our accounts receivable, and that's another $10.8 million. Then the next category is committed, and we only have one item in that category, and that's what will be committed for tax reevaluation. And we do ours internally. However, we do add staff to do that. Some counties hire somebody else to do it, and this is the mechanism where the state wants to make sure everybody builds up enough money to pay for the reval when they come every 4 years. And so that number, last year it was 6606, and I've estimated that to be 10,000. That one is not a final number, but it should be somewhere near there. So that basically is $11.2 million that is non-spendable. We can't do anything with it, which brings that number down to $84,520,000. Now, then we get into the category called assigned. And if you'll turn to the next page, page 2, you will see some assignments that we're recommending. The first one is for extraordinary circumstances. As you know, once we move funds into the capital reserve fund, then we can't get them back. They're there for capital items only. And so it's important to have some reserve in the general fund for unanticipated things. Sometimes in the past we've used it for things like overages in foster care, when either the case mix or the number of children is more expensive than we originally estimated. And so the number there we've proposed is $5 million, and it's really a risk tolerance. Obviously by being extraordinary circumstances, it's things we don't really think of that could happen. The next $2 million relates to self-insured plans. As you know, the county is self-insured for our health care, our workers' comp, and our liability. And one year, a couple years ago, we did have to put in an extra $2 million. So it's important to have some funds assigned in case that happens. The third category is called pending and potential claims. And those relate to sometimes legal issues and things that we need to reserve in case things happen. The fourth category is tax appeals, and that number is a number that Brent, our tax assessor, gave me in terms of estimated amounts of tax appeals, and that was $4.4 million. And the last number is landfill post-closure cost. We are required, after we close a landfill, there's still a lot of expenses that go on just about forever. We'll all be dead before they're done. And so we've got $300,000 for that. So that's a total of $20,339,328. Now, part of what created the $19 million of overages were projects that just didn't get completed in time. And you've already approved at the August meeting the reappropriation of $3,799,916 in fund balance. At the September meeting we just discussed, there'll be another $311,000. And then there were just purchase orders that the largest part of the $595,598 was $412,000 in ambulances, where we had ordered them. They had not come in yet, and so we moved that to the next year. So there's $25 million of fund balance that is there. Again, we don't want to transfer to the capital reserve fund, and it's in legal terms it's assigned. So that brings us down another to the 25. Then the next one is reserved by 15%. I'm back on page 1 now. Reserved by 15% fund balance policy. This board has said historically that you wanted at least 15% of your annual budget in fund balance. And that's designed to provide working capital, so I'm not sweating a payroll, because our monies don't come in evenly during the year. So that's the reserve by 15% fund balance is $32 million. So when you pull those out of the $95 million, you wind up with $27,474,958. That would be the number that, according to your policy, we would transfer to the capital reserve funds to have over there for all these needs that we've talked about needed there. Let me talk a little bit about fund balance policy. The LGC, the Local Government Commission that regulates counties, requires an 8% minimum, which is basically 1 month's expenditures. For a county our size, they generally recommend a 20% minimum. What we have historically found at Cabarrus County is that our 15% has worked pretty well. And so we found that to be adequate, and so that's why that's the number we used in pulling out from the unassigned to the assigned. Now, over the years, since the Great Recession, we have not transferred the funds from the general fund to the capital reserve fund to increase our flexibility. Because during these times, we haven't known just what our property tax is going to come in, just what sales tax we're going to do. And so if you'll look on down the page, you'll see that in fiscal 09, had we done the transfer, we would have transferred $7.1 million into capital reserve. Fiscal 10, we would have transferred $7.6 million. Fiscal 11, we would have transferred about $1,489,000. And fiscal 12, it would have dipped into fund balance $629,000. That was the year you paid off the jail annex for $9.5 million, and that's what created that negative. So over the years that we have not transferred, we have built up in the general fund $15.6 million. And then this year, what we built up this past fiscal year was $11,814,484. So that's where we get the $27 million. I didn't want anybody to think, well, it just came all this year. It's something that's been building. 11.8 came this year, but the $15,660,000 came since fiscal 9. All right, so that takes us through page 1 and page 2. Page 2A was showing the various appropriations. Let's talk a little bit about page 3. Page 3 gets into a little more detail of the $19 million. The revenues came in $8.7 million over budget, and we're going to talk about that on page 4. The expenses came in under budget, $10.9 million. And then a lot of those reasons the expenses didn't come in was because of the items that need to be reappropriated. So when you take the reappropriations out, it comes from the $19 million down to $15 million. Let's talk a little bit on page 4 about what happened with revenues. The first item in the revenue discussion is sales taxes. We budgeted $30,288,000 in sales taxes, and they came in at $36,258,000, a difference of almost $6 million, $5.9 million. Now, the way sales tax work is we're always in arrears. So at the time we're doing the budget, we don't have all this information. In fact, we just got the final June information to put into the audit for this. But we knew that things were looking better. So when we did our fiscal 14 budget, we upped the budget for sales tax 17.33%. So what's in the budget for the fiscal year we're in right now is $35,536. We upped it 5.248. Now, it may be that we could have upped it a little more since last year it was $5,000,009. However, you don't know the forecast from the state. And from what I hear, Cabarrus County doesn't always do what the state does, so it makes it a little bit harder. Let me show you on page 6. I talk a little bit about sales taxes because I was looking at that. What makes sales taxes hard to estimate is refunds. The nonprofits in our area get refunds of the sales tax, so they pay it and they get it back, just like we do. And we have some fairly large institutions in our county that get funds back. So if you'll look on page 6, the refunds in fiscal 9 were $7 million, fiscal 10, $2.8, fiscal 11, almost $7 million, fiscal 12, $3.8, fiscal 13, $4.3. So we were kind of on a high, low, And then fiscal 13 was kind of in the middle. It wasn't quite as expected. And there is no way for us to anticipate those. That's why when the legislation came up this summer or this spring, when they were talking about doing away with the refunds, it would sure make our life easier if we didn't do the refunds, because then we could calculate our revenues easier. But that, I think they capped it at 45 million, which wasn't going to basically change anything for us. So as you can see, the annual receipts going from 30.9, 27.9, 25.3, 33, and 36. So they're kind of over the map, and this is a very difficult thing to estimate. But fortunately, and always we want to be conservative. We definitely, would prefer that our numbers we estimated too low and it came in better than we estimated too high and it came in lower. So that's what happened with sales taxes. On page 5, no, not 5, page 7, I've got some detail on the property taxes. Property taxes were budgeted in fiscal 13 at about $127.4 million. And what came in was $131 million, so it was $3.7 million over, which is the direction you want it to go, although we wish it were a little closer. What we did for the budget for 14 was we increased it 4.86%, up to $133 million. And so we upped the budget $6.1 million. Now, when we look on page 7 at the property taxes, you've got a 5-year history there, and it shows how the taxes, the valuations they were fairly steady, and then in fiscal 13 we had our reval, and they decreased about 12%. Another thing that affects the tax receipts is your collection percentage. By law, we can only budget the collection percentage that we actually received the year before. And so if you'll look at that first thing, the dollar effect of the difference in the collection percentage, sometimes they're up and sometimes they're down. In fiscal 09, we would have budgeted $489,000 more than what it generated because we came in lower on our collection percentage than what it was. And same thing in fiscal 13. We budgeted to collect 97.71. We only collected 97.29. And that difference of 0.42% was almost $500,000. So that's part of the calculation. The other relates to what was actually budgeted during the year. And if you'll notice, the second group, we don't change our property tax budget very much during the year. In fact, we didn't at all except for in fiscal 09. So on the real alone, we were up $1.7 million. So that basically was the difference. Now, if you'll notice, we start with the original levy. And for fiscal 13, that was $17,289,501, which was up right much for what was used for the budget above of $16,957. So between when we did the budget and when the tax bills went out in July, we had an increase. Then we had discoveries during the year, and if you'll notice, looking from 09 through to 13, discoveries go a high of $107 million to a low of $25 million. Then you have to consider abatements, and they go from a high in 12 of $233 million to a low of $57 million in 11, and the 13 number was $163 million. So those abatements and discoveries also affect what we wind up getting in taxes. The next section is the delinquents. If you'll notice, we have consistently budgeted more money for the delinquents, and we've been getting more. The tax department has worked really hard on their delinquent collections, and this is showing in this. And so, and we have upped the budget, like I say, every year for that. But of the increase, about 1.7 relates to the current year property. About 1.7 relates to delinquents, and then $222,000 is the interest on those delinquents. So that tells you where $3.6 million of the $3.7 million come from. All right. Okay, the next item on page 4 again is an area where we have created this fund balance. The next item is transportation Medicaid. That was budgeted at $810,000 and came in at $1,334,000 for a difference of $524,000. What happened is those billings got behind, and during fiscal year 13, we got caught up. So that $1,334,000 is about 16 months of revenue, not just 12. But we did increase the budget 11% for this coming year. Another $89,000. So we did try to adjust for what we think those increases are. Ambulance fees, we budgeted $4.4 million and they came in $4.7 million for a difference of $320,000. And this year we upped the budget $145,000 of that, 3.2%. What we are attributing that increase to is there was a rate increase on 7/1/12, and so this was the result of that. The next item, well, the next two items we can probably take together. It's register of deeds and construction standards. And those kind of run together because they're basically what's going on in the building world. For register of deeds, we'd budgeted $1,300,000 and it came in at $1,700,000. For construction, we budgeted about $1,471,000. It came in about $2 million. So between those two, that's almost $1 million that came in over budget. And we upped the budget 30% on register of deeds and 47% on construction standards. So we basically accounted for that in next year's budget. And that was due to the economy improving, and very thankful for that. That's a good sign. The next item is called Medicaid Hold Harmless, is what we call it on our accounting. Years ago, what they did was we were getting Article 44 sales tax, and we were paying a nickel on the Medicaid. And what they did was they said, okay, you don't have to pay the nickel anymore, but you're not going to get the 44 anymore. So they did a swap, and then they said, but we'll hold you harmless on that. So the state does calculations and then just sends us a check. And they have varied. I did some history on this. In fiscal 08, we got $16,821. Fiscal 9 and 10, we got nothing. Fiscal 11, we got $458,000. Fiscal 12, we got $68,000. Are you seeing this? And then fiscal 13 was the jackpot year. We got $894,000. And by the way, what they originally sent was more than that. Then they sent me something, said, oh, we miscorrected it, $58,000, send it back. So that's a real roller coaster. So historically, we have not budgeted that. But that came in, and that's $884,000 of the $19 million. Sale of fixed assets. If you'll recall, we sold 457 Lake Concord Road this past year. And so that's what created that amount over budget. We usually budget about $30,000 for different types of sales during the year of property, but this year we had a large piece of property. Program fees. We budgeted $642,000 and it came in at $1,400,000, $758,000 more. What the biggie is there is it's called SMCP, State Misdemeanor Criminal Prevention. And what that is when we are paid to house other people's prisoners. And this was the first year that we were doing that, and we had not budgeted it, and lo and behold, it came in right much money. So this year, we doubled the budget pretty much and budgeted funds for that. So that is now a budgeted item. We added the $631,000 to the budget. Other fees were related to the jail and some transportation fees that were over budget. And the interest on investments. I've been real conservative in what I've budgeted for interest, and although the rates are very, very low, right now we have it's a balance of rates and how much you have invested. And right now we have more invested, so we're coming in a little better. But the rates are pathetic. Fund balance. We had budgeted $5.7 million in fund balance. Well, obviously that doesn't come in as a revenue when you're basically budgeting to use that money. And then the state revenues. We had budgeted $19.3 million in state revenues, primarily in the human services area, and only $18.9 came in, so it was $475 under budget. However, the expenses, when we look at the expense side, were a lot more than that under budget. And this year, due to the anticipated state cuts and the federal sequestration, we reduced our expectation of state funds by 1.2%, or $232,000. So that's a little bit on the revenue side. Page 5 talks about the expense side, where we were 10.8 million under, or 10.9 million under on the expenses. The first categories are the salaries and wages and fringes, and that's basically your salary vacancy. That has come down every year, but it still exists as basically what you'd call a savings, what you did not spend that you'd budgeted. And the human services was 2.1 million below the budget. Remember, the revenue was under, the expense was as well. Now, in order to do some better budgeting on the human services, because that is a very complex budget with all the different funding sources, all the different ways to spend it. This, for fiscal 15, we plan to use state software that's a budget template to try to really get a better handle on our human services budget. So that'll be some of the fun we're going to undergo in the next few months. The fuel budget. We had budgeted 1.1 million, only spent $1 million, so there was 169,000. If you recall, 69 of it I think was in a fuel contingency account that we didn't use. Now we did increase that budget this year, given expectation of fuel prices going up. Same thing with natural gas and power. We had budgeted $1.7 million, only spent $1.2 million for 484,000 in savings. But next year we budgeted $1.794. A 3.3% increase because we hear Duke Power has a rate increase in the neighborhood of 3%. So, and also our energy conservation measures are working. Kyle's group has worked really hard to change the lightings and change various ways that we are using energy, and we are saving money due to those efforts. The next account was purchase services, and that's really, what are we going to buy this year? We had budgeted $1,347,000, only spent $1,087,000 for a difference of $260,000. And we do have a reappropriation of $20,000 that relates to the yard work. Those vary depending on what you are purchasing at the time, and obviously we don't want to encourage anything to be spent that doesn't need to be spent. So if it's not spent, it just goes back into the general fund. The food line, we budgeted 1.1 million, spent about $1 million for a savings of 138,000. The Sheriff's Department renegotiated the food contract at the jail, and it saved us a lot of money. So thanks to them for that. And then next year we reduced the budget a little bit, 0.48%, only 5,600, but basically we kept those savings in that line item. Building and ground maintenance, we had budgeted $1,622,000, only spent $1,322,000 for $300,000 in savings. There were several projects that we moved to that we reappropriated and moved to the other funds, and there was just not all the projects in that particular line were done. Service contracts. I need to let you know that also includes service calls. And so where we had budgeted so much for the service contract itself and so much for the calls, apparently we're doing a really good job on preventive maintenance, and we didn't have as many of the service calls as we anticipated. We budgeted $3.1 million, only spent right at 2.5 for savings of $656,000. And I've got more detail on that. Some of those service contracts related to IT, about 112,000 of them. They were successful in negotiating some lower costs. They stretched some months out to try to keep our costs down. The grounds maintenance was under budget $105,000. The building maintenance under budget $178,000. The jail maintenance contract was under $109,000. Some other facility services were under $41,000. The sheriff was under $41,000, and DSS was under $37,000. In talking with Kyle about some of these things, they did not have to replace some chillers that they had anticipated. They did not have to replace fire and security alarms that they had anticipated. And the jail maintenance costs were not as expensive as anticipated. And the preventive maintenance reduced right much of these service costs. So we had some good luck in fiscal 13. Medical consultants, we saved about $111,000, although that particular line item we did increase the budget 1.46% by $15,000 for next year. That one is it depends on the health of your consumers. The schools are on here because they were a big ticket item in terms of what created that overage. However, most of that is going to be reappropriated, and it's in the reappropriation line. And then in all other, there's $1,000,003, and that includes ambulances and EMS grants and wrecked car replacement and IT projects and several other things that came in under budget. Are there any questions on the revenue and expense side?
And thank you very much for preparing this. This is tremendous. I don't know if anybody else had asked for this, but I had asked for it about 2 weeks ago, and I thank you very much for preparing this. This really gives me a lot of great information. I am curious on page 4, revenues under fund balance, when we've allocated $5.765 million out of the fund balance. Do you have an idea of what some of the bigger allocations were out of the 5.65 million what?
A lot of that was one-time funds for the schools, and then there were some one-time projects for the county as well. It was all one-time stuff.
What kind of one-time projects were they for the county?
I'll get you a
There was
list.
some court projects that Todd had, court security type projects.
That we saw.
But the school systems both had projects. We actually do have a list that we can provide to you
I can get
in
you.
detail for that.
Just a variety of the smaller projects, though, not anything that was significant.
No one thing that was
Typically, your annual reappropriations, like Ann has talked about this evening, the regular grants and then the projects that didn't get completed, and then the one-time projects were what made that 5.7 million up. And we actually do have another spreadsheet that Ann can share with you since, goes back to 2008. That'll tell you all the changes in the budget and what got appropriated for fund balance, so you can see that over multiple years. Because we were going back and doing a little bit of research. The biggest reasons that we changed our adopted budget to our amended budget at the end of the year is for fund balance appropriations for one-time projects. Typically, that only happen one time, and then they're gone the next year, and the budget goes back to the size that it was in the previous point in time. So we've got that information too, because it was very helpful for us.
Yeah, because if you're moving from capital reserve to, in order to spend it, you got to move it over into the general fund to spend it, and that's what, sometimes that amended budget goes up, and then it goes right back, like Pam said, goes right back down to that, I think.
And a big, large transaction that changes the adopted budget to the amended budget is anytime we do a refinancing or a debt project, you have to put in what us accountants call a paper journal entry, where you have to record the transaction on your books, but yet it doesn't take any money away from you and it doesn't give you any money. But I think it was 2012 was like $73 million. So, I mean, it made the budget look like it escalated substantially higher, but it really didn't happen because it was just a paper entry recording that actual transaction. And I think that spreadsheet will be very helpful to you to be able to look through that.
It shows that for 2013, the reappropriation amount was $2,036,000, and then the one-time projects were $2.8 million. And I believe $1,907,550 related to the schools. So that leaves about $800,000 or $900,000 that were county projects. But we can get you that list, not a problem. Any other questions? Okay, page 8, I believe that's where I am. Page 8 is to give you some background on our capital reserve. And you may want to put 8 in front of 9. That's the way I look at it, to see where things are. Now, in our capital reserve, we have 2 areas that are restricted. We've got funds for RCC future projects of $45,000 and some CVB distribution that relates to projects, and that's $292,000. So there's not that. Those are 2 pieces of the $1,218,000 that are that's in that program. Also, there's $250,000 in that reserve that relates to grading costs that we didn't pay, that we may have to pay depending on who buys the property, and so that's included in this too. So basically, what we're starting with that you could spend is $630,993. And that's at the bottom of page 9 in the last column. And what I wanted to point out is the last transfer into that, if you look on page 8, in that first column in 09, we transferred $4.3 million. And And that was the last transfer we made of that nature. And then that year, we also put in $7.8 million from the general fund to the capital reserve to pay for some projects. So if you look at the revenues that were unrestricted, in '09, we got $12.4 million. And then in fiscal '10, it wasn't but $1.9 million, 11, $55,000, 12, $45,000, 13, $82,000. So basically, not making those transfers, in essence, it was not funded. So that's why it's got so low. And then on page 9, it shows you the various projects by year that were funded out of the capital reserve. And so you'll see that in fiscal 9, $13 million in projects were funded. In fiscal 10, $4.9 million. Fiscal 11, $1.6 million. Fiscal 12, $3.8 million. And fiscal 13, $1.6 million. And this year's budget was $1,225,000. Now, on page 1, we were discussing what would be available to transfer. And so what I've done on page 9 is shown, if you make the transfer that we came up with on page 1 of the $27,474, you'd have $28 million, $28.1 million in the capital reserve. And Lord knows we've got lots of needs, but that would put those funds there. The last page I have is the page from the budget. Those of you who are here for the budget will remember this page. And what it's showing is what's in our capital reserve plan right now. And in the top are the things that are in the plan. Of course, 14 is adopted and approved. The other items out for planning are still up for grabs, I guess. But the ones at the top, the Arena Event Center entrance, the marquee, the paving the parking lot, and the Government Center chiller replacement, those could be funded from the funds that are sitting there, the 660. Everything below it were items that at the time I said, now this is $5,945,000 in projects that we've got on the list, we've got them laid out, but we got to fund them if we're going to do them, because they are not funded. The elections voting equipment is one of the larger ones in 17. Northeast Cabarrus Community Park in 16. The cosmetology, CNA paramedic in 15, $1.5 million. So I just wanted to give you some information on kind of where we were in our capital project funding. Well, that's a mouthful. I figure you've got some questions.
I have a couple of questions. First, thank you again for preparing this. It shows the amount of available fund balance at the bottom of page 1 at almost $12 million. On page 3A, you've got a reduction of how you got to that almost $12 million, and one of those is about $2 million, the change in 15% fund balance based on budget. So had we had a flat budget, we essentially would have had about $14 million to go to the available for appropriation. Is that right?
Yes, you're right, because as you change your budget, obviously it changes to 15%. So
Yeah.
if everything stays the same, then that would not increase. But as we're trying to always keep 15% of whatever the next year's budget base is, whatever it was at the beginning of the year.
So we would have had about $14 million available for appropriation. Now, when we changed the tax rate from 63 cents to 70 cents, if we collected about $130 million last year in ad valorem revenue, that produced about $13 million more in revenue by changing the tax rate, right?
I can get to that sheet on the revenues.
Can you ask that question one more time?
Yes.
I just want to know how much the change in the tax rate affected the revenues.
Affected ad valorem revenue. That's right.
Ad valorem, going from
Yeah.
63 to 70.
We went revenue neutral, and revenue neutral means that the tax rate change generates the same amount of money at the old value as it does at the new value.
Right. I understand that. But at 63 cents, we would have produced about 117 million, and at 70 cents, we produced about 130 million. Is that right?
The actual year-to-date was 131.
Yeah. And so if you take 10%, because 63 is 10% of, or 90% of 70, then you would reduce that, and it would be about $13 million. And so my point is that when we passed this tax rate, when the Board of Commission passed this tax rate, there were several comments that we would not be able to, that our services were going to be absolutely gutted if we did not raise the tax rate. And what we find out is that had we left the tax rate exactly the same, we would have had $1 million surplus, and all of our services would have stayed exactly the same, and not one change. Isn't that right?
I don't know. What page are you on?
Oh, I'm just using your data, that's all. I mean, if the tax rate produced $13 million extra, but we have a $14 million surplus, we could have gone without that $13 million extra and still had a $1 million surplus and funded our government at exactly the same level that it's funded at last year.
Okay, well, I'll try to clarify for you. The tax rate at 63 cents on the 2012 values generated the same tax monies at fiscal 13 at the 70-cent rate, except for the 1.7 million that Ann pointed out to you.
We
only collected an additional 1.7 million. The remainder of all that excess came from a whole bunch of other revenues and expenditures that weren't spent. It didn't come from an increase in the property tax rate.
Right. My point was that all the way through the budget process of 2013, Commissioner Cabarrus said things like, we are going to have to gut services, we're going to have to close our parks, we're going to have to lay off our paramedics, get entry-level EMTs, just a parade of horribles is what was going to happen to the county if we didn't raise the tax rate. And yet what we find out tonight is we could have left the tax rate exactly the same. We would have brought in less money than we brought in 2012. I agree with that. But we would have funded our budget exactly how it was funded now, and we would have had $1 million surplus. Isn't that correct?
I feel like we're Monday morning quarterbacking.
I think we would need to get with Brent and go back and do that actual calculation, because if we left it at 63 cents with the new values, we'd need to know what that tax rate would generate.
Part of that has to
the
do with
excess that we collected.
Doesn't part of that have to do with, for example, with the sales tax, the budgeted amount? I mean, that's your best guess. And thankfully, the economy's gotten better, but there was no way for you to know that when we did the budget. I mean, it's a good thing when we bring in more money on things like sales tax and even on the property tax, because we were conservative. And it's also a good thing when you find out that our staff has worked really hard and conserved a lot of energy and saved on the other side. It's a good thing that Register of Deeds construction standards have increased because the economy's improved. So you can say that in retrospect that it would have been the same. But when you do the budget, you have to do your best guess at that point in time. And at that point in time, we couldn't project out that there'd be that much of a difference in the sales tax. And it has to be a balanced budget on that date when you approve the budget. So you're right, budgeted and actual, though, I think the difference, I understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I think that based on the budget was perfect, was right in where it needed to be based on best guesses. Thankfully, we've brought in more that we were not expected, and we saved more that we were not expecting, which is the same thing that anybody does, whether it's your home. I mean, my numbers wouldn't be like this, but same thing at home, you know. My family is, I'm happy right now because the weather's been cooler this summer than normal. So my budgeted amount for what I normally would spend on my utility bills, knock on wood, right now or less. Now, come wintertime, we might end up spending more than I normally spend because I think it's going to be a bad winter. So, you know, I think that what you're saying has some validity to it, but at the same time, we couldn't project out the fluctuations during the year, which we've realized.
And please don't get me wrong, ladies. I think y'all do a tremendous job. This is not about the budget. It's about how the tax increase was sold to people. And the argument is made that we couldn't have predicted this, except for 3 years in a row we've had double-digit million-dollar tax surpluses. We had $14 million at the end of 2011. We spent $9.5 million of that surplus in 2012 and finished the year with $15.5 million. So if you have 15.5 million and you spent 9.5 million, that means you had 25 million. So the 2 years before we raised the taxes, we had $25 million in surplus, and the year after we raised the taxes, we had $14 million in surplus, and yet county commissioners at the time of the tax rate were saying things like, I don't see us gutting services for the sole purpose of being able to say that we never raised taxes. Are we prepared to gut all of our county services, fundamentally change the county government on one vote? Are we prepared to shut down, not reduce, are we prepared to shut down the libraries, parks, cooperative extension, lay off repair medics, get basic level EMTs, and shut down senior programs, because that's what would happen. And that was just materially untrue. We could have kept the budget exactly as we had it last year, and we would have ended with a $1 million surplus. And it's not Monday morning quarterback. This is an article that I wrote for the Independent Tribune, and this is published July 1st, 2012, and it says, when a governmental body runs surpluses, it is collecting more tax revenue than it spends. Cabarrus County revenues could easily be decreased to meet current spending levels without causing any reduction in services, because the county receives more revenue than it spends. And that's been that way for 3 years. We've had double-digit surpluses, and instead of telling people we would like to build our capital reserve fund, we told them we are going to have to devastate your services if we don't raise the taxes. And I think that that was a tax increase that was based on false pretenses, and I don't think that's appropriate for the people of Cabarrus County.
The amount of the property tax that was creating this is 3.7 million. So of the 19, only 3.7 related to property taxes. And I could go back and look and see how much it was each year. But like what Ms. Poole was saying, when you're doing the budget, by law, we have to look at what is reasonably estimable to come in. And so we have to take into account what's going on there. And I think, fortunately for Cabarrus County, our recovery is better than anticipated. However, when you're trying to estimate that, you know, it's very difficult. And I'll admit that my task is to estimate conservatively on revenues and expenses to try to get it as close to even. And that's why I wanted to point out the changes we made in the budget after having this information, because our goal is to be right on it. And it's very, very difficult to do. But in terms of where we missed it, the tax rate, the things that affect the tax rate is only 3.7 million. A lot of these other things, the Medicaid hold harmless, the recovery with the Register of Deeds and construction standards, the funding with the state, a lot of those things played into it. And then there again, you got to consider right off the top the amount on page 2A, 4.6 million, and things that just didn't have time to get spent yet. So those things kind of mitigate how much we have. But I'm very pleased that we're in a position of sitting here going, wow, we've got funds we can transfer to the capital reserve fund again, instead of, oh my gosh, things didn't happen as we had hoped, and so now what are we going to do? So I guess it's good news, but it does leave us trying our best to improve our budgeting, and we are making efforts to do that.
And please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this is not a prudent financial use of our money. I think that y'all have done a great job. It's about how this tax increase was sold to people, not about how you budget or whether this is a prudent use of our money. But you would agree that even exempting out this $4.6 million in terms of reappropriated funds, that we have about a $14 million surplus this year, which means that if we had 25 for the 2 previous years, we've had about $40 million in surplus revenues the last 3 years. And in the middle of that, we had a tax increase.
I think we come up with 15,660 for the previous 4 years.
Plus the 9.5 that was spent on the jail, right? That was appropriated.
Remember, when we had the revow, the rate increased, but the revenue, we projected less. We came in under revenue neutral. So I guess we just make sure we're talking apples to apples and oranges to oranges here. The rate increased, The revenues were not projected to increase. We actually budgeted less than we did the prior year.
And the point on that has always been, we could have afforded to lose about $14 million, have a reduction in our revenues by about $14 million, and kept services exactly the same, which is what these numbers prove tonight. But that's not what was told to the people. What was told to the people is if we didn't get this additional $14 million, we were going to fundamentally change government services and gut them all and close down parks, and that's wholly untrue. We would have had $1 million left over as surplus had we left the tax rate exactly the same and left all services exactly the same as they're funded in the 2013 fiscal year budget.
And I'll just say again, you can't, in order to do the budget though, okay, in order to do the budget, you have to base the budget on what it would have been projected for the revenues. And therefore, cuts would have had to be made at that time. Now, if we got 6 months down and there was more revenue or less expenses somewhere, they could have come back and said, we want to put this back in the budget. But at that point in time, you have to look at what the projected revenues were. And the tax base was lower. In order to be pretty close to the same, that's where it flushed out. So I'm not disagreeing with you what's happened now, but I just think that, and I understand what you're saying, because you're trying to make, you're making the political statement that you made during the budget process about how we went about the budget. And you guys are welcome to chime in because you were part of the budget too. But if you're looking at the revenues that were projected based on the tax rate, the tax base that had decreased, then in order to make a budget work and be a balanced budget, there would have had to be some cut somewhere to make it balanced. Because you can't write a budget and say, we hope it's going to come in high. You just don't know. We've gone through a recession that's hit a lot of people pretty hard, and a lot of people still pretty hard. Not everybody's recovered so far. So, though I think your point's valid, I just don't think I can't look today and tell you today where we're going to be in June of next year. We have a budget where we hope we're going to come out, but I can't guarantee that now. So you have to plan your monthly expenditures based on the information that you have at this point in time. And I think that's what we did at that point in time. And I believe that we did it this June with the numbers that we had. There were a couple problems, I guess, and some forecasting, and we've tried to change those already so that this year's budget, I don't think we're going to see as much, and I just don't think it's going to be there like it was the past time. But unless sales tax just goes sky high, I don't know. I was out at the mills this past weekend. Seemed to be pretty busy, at least in the food court. I don't know how the stores were doing. So hopefully that increases. Hopefully tourism increases and more people are here and they're spending more money, and we're going to see an increase in that. But I would rather them come in low on especially something like sales tax revenue, because every time, it seems like every time we turn around, Raleigh tends to change how those are dispersed. And we don't get everything that comes in local. That's dispersed across the state. So there's lots of formulas on that one. We don't know these companies that have done some huge sales tax refunds. Those have just been amazing in the budget and completely unexpected. I mean, I don't know if they'd had a chance to explain that part to you on the effort that we have to go to just to get information from Raleigh on who's getting sales tax refunds. They don't even want to tell us that. They just take the money from us. They just don't give us the money. They keep the money, you know. So that's been an issue too. So, but at that point in time, and I think come June, we'll look at wherever we are for next year's budget, and we'll say, you know, if it comes to pass that from an audit that we have a lot of extra money, then, you know, I think we'll have to look at it there just like we do every other year. So, again, I understand what you're saying. I don't agree with all of your conclusions, but I do understand what you're saying.
Well, I appreciate that. I would say this is not a political point for me. This is a point about the fact that our residents are paying 10% more right now than what they would have paid under the 63-cent tax. We just did this analysis for Windshear talking about how they needed an incentive, and had we not done that 63-cent raise from 63 cents to 70 cents, then Windshear would not have needed the incentive that they came and asked us for. And all of our citizens would have had 10% more to pay, and I think that's more than a political point, the fact that they're paying 10% more right now than what they would have paid had we not changed the tax rate. To the second point, I understand budgets are hard to evaluate. I would say that if this happened in an individual year, that that point would be a very strong point. The fact that it's happened 3 years in a row and they've been 3 double-digit million-dollar surpluses, I think that point is not as valid as it would be in a single year. And to the final point, on June 30th, 2012, we had $15.5 million sitting in a surplus account that was unappropriated. And had we gone forward with a budget at 63 cents, that would have more than covered the revenue that was going to be gained from moving to 70 cents. And so we had a fail-safe that was $15.5 million in addition to our $30 million reserve fund, and probably about $20 million in other reserve accounts. As you note on here, we've got about $52 million in reserve funds. This $15.5 million was in addition to those things, and I don't think that, well, I'll just leave it at that.
Are there any other questions or information that this has not been audited yet? Is that correct?
It's close. It's close.
Okay. So these are not the final numbers, these are...
I don't anticipate anything changing except the tax revaluation number.
So there may be some changes to it still.
Yeah, but I anticipate those to be minor.
Okay. Are there any?
I'd just like to compliment Ms. Honeycutt on the work that you've done. You've done an excellent job of laying this out and understanding it to us, explaining it to us so we can understand. I think that it would be appropriate in your role is if when you appear before us in the future, you wear a shawl and bring your crystal ball and put it in front of you, because that's what a lot of this boils down to. But I think you've done a very good job. I'm glad that we've been able to realize some surpluses over the past few years. I don't feel like that money has been wasted in any way. We could have easily turned that around by budgeting some of these projects that we've covered in cash, which would have assured that we would have had a budget shortfall. I don't want to be placed in that position. I was not on the board when the tax increase was instituted, but I can certainly see the value in doing that. If we had excess funds that we did not have needs for, after we've just heard about the condition of some of our schools and some of the roofing projects and so forth and so on, if we have any opportunity to fund any of those projects in cash as opposed to financing them, I think we're doing our citizens a service, and we're saving them perhaps 50% of the cost of some of those projects. So I think that's good planning and good management. You can always go backwards and guess, but unfortunately, unless you have that crystal ball working really well, that's not going to work out very well for us. So, I think that, Commissioner Oestreich's point about this being sold to the citizens the wrong way, I think for us to sit here and establish a tax rate and look at the what-ifs, and that's all we can do is look at the what-ifs. And so what if that sales tax doesn't come in higher than we anticipated, and what if, and you can go down a very long list of things, then obviously at some point services are going to have to be cut. We have to pay for those things. Many of the things in our Department of Social Services are mandated. We have no decision, no choice in those matters. So we're not going to be cutting things there. And you can go down the entire list. So I think the obvious things that we have to look at are those that you mentioned. And if the crystal ball is wrong and if it falls short, those things are going to happen. So I would much rather have that in an open, honest discussion with citizens, if these things happen, this is where we'll have to cut, than to come up and say, sorry guys, we didn't figure this right, so we're going to have to cut our library hours like we did several years ago. And we're going to have to be closed on alternating Saturdays, and I don't know exactly what all the measures that were taken there, but we're causing our, you know, in a time of, and I use the library just as one example, in a time of high unemployment, that's when some of those services are the most valuable, when those people who are seeking employment need a place to go and access the internet and access publications to look for work. So it's you know, it's just not as simple as it always might appear, but thank you for the job that you do.
Okay, any other questions on these projections? Yes, sir.
I think if you go back and look at the video of the budget session that Jason was talking about, there was a lot of things said that had to do with, you know, we're going to have to shut down, lay off deputies or take their cars away from them, all this kind of stuff. And it was exaggerated quite a bit. And I think that's the point he's trying to make, is the fact that, you know, I mean, I don't, you know, the tax increase was voted on and passed. County's got more money, taxpayers have got less. You know, I don't like the fact that it cost me about $300 a month just to live in my house, just pay the taxes on it. But, you know, that's the way things are. But some things were exaggerated during that budget process, and if you go back and look at it, you'll know that they were. And it wasn't exactly truthful to the taxpayers, I don't think.
Okay, any other comments before we move on? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Capital needs. Pam Dubois is going to address those.
We did not too long ago had a meeting with Cabarrus County Schools, Kannapolis City Schools, and Rowan Cabarrus Community College, and inclusive of Cabarrus County, where we gathered all the capital needs in priority order from each one of those agencies, and those lists are attached for your review. There has been discussions of whether the board would prefer to do another one-time funding or to further discuss the projects on how they should be addressed, whether the debt should be issued, whether cash should be paid for those particular projects. But what we have provided you here is a list of all those projects. We did request them to put them in priority order, so that would be beneficial to the board to review those. Everybody has a single list except for Cabarrus County Schools because they have a great deal of needs. So their list is split between projects $200,000 and below and $200,000 and above. So with the discussion that came earlier with them talking about the roofs and needs along those lines, you should be able to see the projects in which they are requesting for additional funds to be in consideration for those projects. So these lists are here for you to review, have a general conversation if you so choose, whether you want to talk about whether we issue debt for them, whether we pay cash for them, or how we proceed to take care of some of these particular projects. With our budget last year, we did make one modification where we added to the school systems a little over $1 million, where we took their the money that we gave Cabarrus County Schools for capital outlay. The state removed the ADM funding from them, so they started paying for their computer lease out of their capital money. We did rectify that and added some money into their regular reoccurring operational costs to cover that, so we could free up some capital money, but they're still only receiving $1 million for the school system that they have for larger capital items outside their building and maintenance. So these lists would be very beneficial for you as far as your review is concerned, and to let the staff know which direction you would like to head in, whether we issue debt, which we proposed in the 5-year plan, or we take some of the excess funds and actually pay for some of those projects that have been provided. And the first list is up there, which is the projects over 200,000, under 200,000.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is the schools have a lot of needs, and we do too as a county. I mean, you guys are going to, if you'll look at our capital improvement 5-year plan, some of the things that are moving forward, we've got our department heads looking at those as well, such as Mr. Rose over there. He is looking, one of those projects is a new human services center. He's looking really hard at that. Do we need a new building? Can we stay where we're at? Maybe provide some satellites and some multi-use offices somewhere else. So we're looking really hard at ours, as well as I know the schools are. But I think the number was, I can't read it because of my glasses, but about 300 million. Is that?
I'm not exactly sure what the grand total is. I could add it up and
But
come back with a
I think
figure, but
Cabarrus had over 200, and then it was about 50-50 for Rowan Cabarrus in there. So we know we have a lot of needs. They're prioritizing a lot of those, Mr. Burge, as you said, were roofs and stuff that you typically don't want to go out and, borrow money for. If we can pay cash for some of those, that'd be great. But you do have some new schools in there. They're talking about, Cabarrus is talking about an elementary school that's an immediate need. And then we're talking Mount Pleasant Middle School and Central Cabarrus High School, and I think Northwest High School is in there as well, as being replacements. Kannapolis has got an intermediate school or middle school, I'm not sure what they're calling that. And then Rowan Cabarrus has got not only the remodeling of their cosmetology, but they've also got a Building 4000 out there on the campus. So there's some big needs. So we've tried to set the budget for the next 5 years to forecast that out so that you'll have some revenue to absorb some debt. But again, there is a reval year in there, and that would require to maintain the current tax rate in order to do that. The board, some of you and others, the new members may not remember, but we did tell them that about 3 or 4 years ago, no new construction for 5 years. 2016 is the year we're looking. As you heard tonight, that elementary school is probably needed right now that they're talking about. But either way, you have in your previous discussions, the previous members, you talked that the next time you issue debt, you wanted it to be a GO bonds, which means it needed to be a public referendum. So if you're looking at construction to start in 2016, there's going to need to be some discussions between this board and the boards of education and the community college. How do you want to fund some of this? Once you identify some projects, how do you want to fund? How much debt do you want to take on? And then you need to start talking about a referendum. When is the most opportune time to hold that? So those are some pretty important discussions that you guys are going to have coming up, some pretty important decisions that you're going to have coming up. So we wanted to make sure we showed you the what's out there in potential cash that you have, but then also what are those needs? And you're going to be hearing some more from the schools. I think this is the first time we've had both school systems and the community college in the same room listening to their needs and their wants. And some of them are wants, but the majority of them are very much needs. So we need to think about that, and we'll answer any questions if you have on these lists. If it gets about a particular project from a particular school or whatever, we probably can't answer that. We can talk about our projects, but we can maybe talk about a little bit of those projects that are coming down the road with the schools. But if you get too specific, then we're going to have to ask you to, we'll take your question and go to the schools. So.
Will we be having some more discussion about this maybe at our retreat that we're talking about?
Yes, sir. That's one of the capital needs is one of the topics that I'd hope we could discuss and get some direction. Again, depending on if it is a bond referendum that's going to go for a vote, by statutes, there's only certain times you can hold those votes. And there's going to take some prep time for those. So you're going to need to start making some decisions pretty quickly. If you are waiting to take on debt or there's a couple of different ways of looking at it. You can wait till 2016, or you can go now, give the schools whatever direction you want to give them so that they can actually start construction day one in fiscal year 2013. If you wait, or 2016, excuse me, if you wait, then that could potentially, usually there's a year or year and a half, maybe 2 years out that you need to start looking at how you're going to fund it And if you wait till 2016, they're not going to move into the school until 18 or 19. As it is now, if they started construction on day one, 2016, you're looking at a minimum of a year before the school would even open, just because of construction time. So the closer you can get to that date for them, if in fact you want to take on that debt, the better for them, so that they can do their planning and projections and redistricting, whatever it is between now and then, to take on the projected growth that they're experiencing. Hope that made sense.
What we had talked about, just as a reminder, as far as a bond referendum, the projected amount, total amount of all projects is $100 million at the most, to give you an idea of that. So that's the reason why, if you look at the page from Cabarrus County Schools, it says greater than 200,000. They've got 20 million in there for an elementary school. That is number one. They've got Central Cabarrus in there at 47 million. They've got Mount Pleasant Middle at 33. I don't think Mount Pleasant Middle is going to be that much, because it'll be smaller than what they've built previously. So depending on where they would place that one may be closer to the 20 to 23 million, maybe 25, somewhere in there. So some of the numbers are guesstimates on there. But obviously, just those three projects from Cabarrus County Schools is over $100 million. So to do those three, nobody else would get anything. And so I think we do need to study these. And did you say that Cabarrus County Schools is in priority order?
I had requested everybody to put theirs in priority order.
Okay. Because when they're the smaller projects, they're kind of a whole big group.
Well, the smaller ones might not be. I'm sorry. The ones over 200,000 would be.
Okay. Some of those are kind of hard. They're kind of grouped. If you look at them, they're either grouped by school or grouped by like a bunch of water heaters at the same time. So, but if you'll look over those prior to our retreat, and the number from Rowan Cabarrus for remodeling Cloverleaf is not the same as the number that's in here. I noticed that. Of a previous number, so, and I think there's still some debate in it too. Okay, and some county numbers. So maybe we need to work on looking at a 5-year plan for those to see where we think we would hit and what, how much money we think is available to do some projects.
Could we have a printed version of that, the request, or maybe an email of just those documents, so we don't have to flip back through the agenda?
Next item, we added discussion of Charlotte Douglas International Airport Commission appointment. And let me get to that page. I don't remember what day it was. Friday? Was it Friday? Friday. The county manager and I both received phone calls from Richard Vinroot, which y'all probably know who he is. And there was a request from him, or a suggestion, not a request, I should say. I don't know if I'd say the rumor mill or whatever about the appointment to the Airport Commission Board is that City of Charlotte may go ahead and appoint this week. Who'd you say appointed last night? Gaston County appointed one last night. So he was doing a courtesy call to all the surrounding counties to let us know that once a group has been appointed, I don't know how many that would be, that they might go ahead and call a meeting. So if we wanted to have somebody there whenever they call this meeting, then we might want to appoint sooner rather than later. So we have had, as you know, we've had 3 applicants. Do we have that? Is that a separate document? We've had 3 applicants so far. Megan, are these in our main agenda? Okay. Okay. So if you want to pull those up, My Kindle libraries, no, mine's not coming up. So we've had 3 applications. I don't remember one of the gentlemen's names. I apologize. If you can verify that. Yes.
Top left corner, there's a little house. Just tap the house.
Tap the house. Okay, there we go. Maybe. Okay. Did y'all get that? If you tap the house, you'll go out of the main document and it'll bring up 2 choices. The one on the right just has 3 names listed. Okay. So we've had 3 applicants so far that we have on file. Richard Cloutier, and I believe that he is the manager of the Concord Regional Airport, if I remember correctly. Robin Hayes and Lanny Lancaster are 3 so far. We had planned to do the appointment at our regular meeting this month. We can suspend the rules, make a motion to suspend the rules, and then consider appointing one of these 3. We can wait and do it at our regular meeting in 2 weeks and see if we have any more applications, because that's what we had said originally, that we were going to do it by then. It's whatever the pleasure of the board is.
Madam Chairman, I think that throughout this process and the discussion of the Airport Authority, we've been extremely cautious not to take a position one way or the other. There were times that one side or the other had asked us to pass resolutions, and we chose not to do that. I think that for us to make an appointment to this board before it has even been established, and while it's still pending litigation and waiting on a court decision, is sort of goes against what we have established previously. I would be in favor of postponing this decision until such time that we get some resolution from the court system as to whether or not this airport authority will actually be established or not. And I'll be happy to put that in the form of a motion, or maybe that's not appropriate at this time.
I don't have a preference one way or the other, so it's whatever. Anybody else have a thought on it? I mean, you can make it in form of the motion, it's fine.
When
or we
will
can have other discussion.
Yeah. When will the pending litigation maybe be settled, or is there any idea?
I haven't been following it closely,
Right.
but I don't think it's imminent. That'd be about as close as I think I could tell you.
Well,
It's gotten a lot more complicated than I think they initially thought.
if this board preliminarily meets with the individuals that are appointed, they're going to have no authority. Is that correct, or how will that work?
Well, I'm not sure. I was listening with interest to some of this discussion, and it sounds as if they can get what would be a quorum of appointments, that board may attempt to try to transact some business. That was the conclusion I was drawing out of the discussion that we were just hearing. I was not aware of that previously. Now, I know that Richard Vinroot represents Mr. Orr, or at
Right.
least that's what the paper has reported. Whether he represents this authority or not, I don't know. Certainly, it appears that they would be in favor of establishing that authority sooner rather than later, would seem to be my take on it. But how exactly they could go about establishing it just through having a quorum of appointees, I'm not really sure.
I did want to make a couple points. One, based on your instructions in August, we'd advertised and solicited applications for your appointment with a closing date of last Thursday, so that you would have them in time for this meeting, because the legislation itself that was passed says that you would need to have your appointment made by October 1st. And again, I don't know whether that's affected by the temporary restraining order or not, but we were operating on a time frame and it presented it to you in that way. So the applications we received did come in before Thursday when that time period closed, and certainly you could reopen that. I think that's within your purview. we'd received those three by that deadline we had previously advertised, however, and the legislation does in fact say October 1st, however that's affected.
And all I know is what I was told by one side of the issue. We've been dealing, as you said, we've been dealing with this all along, getting one side of the issue completely and not much from the other side, and kind of back and forth a little bit. I don't know if they're meeting. He just said that he had called all the, you listened in, he called all the other counties, and he was just doing a courtesy call just in case, was kind of how I got it. So, you know, whether there's going to be a meeting between now and our regular meeting, I have no idea.
Mr. Cook, Mr. Marshall mentioned a TRO. Is there any sort of injunctive relief that's been granted that would prohibit them from meeting at this point?
Commissioner, I'm not sure. I haven't read the TRO itself. I just know there is one in place, and that it basically, as I understood it anyway, suspended the enactment of that legislation pending some sort of resolution of the litigation. And I'm not sure that there's a timetable on that I've heard as to when that would be.
I have not heard a timetable on it either, and have tried to follow this as carefully as possible. Part of my point is we have three extremely qualified applicants for this position. I would be obviously two of those applicants are going to be disappointed in our decision. And I find it unnecessary to create that disappointment for something that may never come to be.
Well, the Charlotte City Council, as of today, is still running the airport, right?
That's my understanding, yes.
So until this court case is heard, it could go any kind of way.
I would agree with that statement, yes. It could go, I mean, they could either declare that that statutory enactment was invalid, or they could declare that it was valid.
I've heard somebody say that the final say is going to be made by the person that's over the Department of Transportation.
Well, I think there was something in the paper that the FAA has weighed in on this in terms of the viability of an authority. There have been some other parties who would arguably have some say in things, like the Local Government Commission. There have been some issues about whether those airport bonds that are the obligation of the city of Charlotte would become in default if the airport property were transferred to this authority. And that's why there was, I think, some sort of a compromise offered at one point in which they were talking about just not transferring the property, just transferring the operation of the airport. So I think it's safe to say that it's a convoluted situation, and where it is at the moment is that there's been an injunction entered that sort of keeps there being a transfer of anything, and so it's still with the city of Charlotte at this point.
We have it on our agenda for the 16th under appointments. So I'm just asking tonight, we can leave it there, do it on the 16th. If anybody thinks that we need to hurry up and do it tonight, then we do, the way that we do that at a work session is to suspend the rules. So we do a vote to suspend the rules, and then we would have another vote on the appointment. So it's fine with me to leave it on the 16th. I don't really have a preference, so I don't know. He called, and to give him the courtesy from the phone call, I said that I would bring it to your attention tonight and see if anybody wanted to change it or just leave it on for the 16th.
I don't see no reason to be in a hurry about it.
Everybody's, okay, then we'll leave it on there. Okay, then if you will look at the agenda. Flip over another page. The only change that we have right now is under consent number 3. Forgot to take that one off. I think you probably have that same note on yours that I have on mine under consent. Item number 3. We already agreed that we were going to move that one to October anyway. So the numbering under consent would just change, stay in the same order, but change the numbering. The only thing we have under new business is the public hearing that we need to do for the text amendments. There's a couple proclamations in there. Okay, and, well, we'll do that next. So, if there are no changes to that, other than what I mentioned, I would accept a motion to approve the agenda for the September 16th meeting.
I'd like to see number 8 move to new business.
Number 8. Okay, so we'll make that G2, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Senior Center?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I would move we approve the agenda as amended.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have on our agenda for a closed session tonight. We do not need that tonight. We're going to move that to 2 weeks from now for the 16th. Okay? So if there's nothing else to come before the board, I accept a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll say goodnight to our television audience. Thank you, everybody.